Yeah, summer was brutal. All right, good morning, or afternoon, I guess now. I got to get used to that. Today is Tuesday, August 25th. This is the first day of Biology 430. Again, one of the nice things about taking this in this online format and having you guys come through Canvas is nobody accidentally wanders into the classroom by mistake. So everybody is here on purpose to take Biology 431, which is the second semester.
Hi, Professor Slutsky.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, yeah, I keep doing that. Sorry, all summer I had morning classes, and then my 4:30 is a morning class, so I'll probably still say morning, even though it's got to be morning somewhere, right?
Yep.
All right, excellent. So this is the second semester. Again, if you haven't done so already, please take the attendance quiz. It is just a way to get in there and show me that you're here today. It's allowing me to take roll today, and I'll take roll on Thursday so that people who don't show up, give me a second, Ashley. Who don't show up will get an opportunity to be dropped, and those that are on the wait list can be added. Yes, you had a question.
Is that an everyday thing? I saw that you're gonna have pop quizzes in the beginning and sometimes
So
after.
yes, so what I'm saying is today and Thursday there will be an attendance quiz just like this one to allow me to take roll to deal with administrative concepts. Starting next week, then there will occasionally be, it won't necessarily be every day, but most of the time it won't be announced. There will be daily quizzes, and those daily quizzes can either come at the beginning of class, which it'll be set up just like it was here. I'll open the class a few minutes early because I have office hours right before this, so I have to bounce Zoom rooms. And again, you'll come to the Zoom first, you'll get the access code, you'll have 5 minutes to answer 5 questions, and that will be that. And so either they will be at the beginning of class to encourage people to be here on time, or they will be at the end of the lecture to encourage people to make sure they stick around for the lecture. Although usually after the first exam, people realize they need to stick around for the whole lecture. So it isn't too much of an issue. And again, you guys are trained. This is the second semester. This is the fun one to teach because you guys have all already been whipped into shape. And so know what is necessary to be responsible in something like this. But we will still have those daily quizzes either at the beginning, and they'll be set up just like this. They won't use Proctorio. Like I said, it's just gonna be 5 questions, 5 minutes. It will either involve the material we covered previously, or in some cases it may cover the material we are covering that day, especially if you're like coming back over the weekend or something like that to make sure you guys are thinking about this material and looking ahead. It may involve some of the material that we'll have coming up as well. All right, excellent. The other thing that will go on, and it will definitely go on at the beginning of every single class, I will have the schedule set up so that you can see what is expected of you over the coming couple weeks that we will have. As you can see, things start out a little bit light, but don't worry, we'll get busy shortly after that. We have a lot to cover today with the introduction, a bunch of assignments and other things going on. Typically assignments are due at the beginning of class, so they are due by noon. One of the things that happened during the summer that I want to warn you guys about is that a lot of people would wait. They would do the assignment the day before, even the night before. And then when they logged on in the morning, they would log on 5 minutes before class started to submit their assignments. And if you do that and you run into some technical issues and it takes you more than 5 minutes to submit it, then your assignment is late. Now, the good news is you are allowed to turn assignments in late, but whether an assignment is 5 days late or whether it is 5 minutes late, it is still going to be half credit. So I do strongly encourage you, when you get the assignment done, just go ahead and submit it there. Don't wait till the last minute, because you never know what kind of problems you have. I don't know how many of you are taking other classes. You shouldn't be. I should be your sole focus of everything in your life. You should just eat, sleep, and A&P. But if some of you had some classes yesterday, you may have dealt with some of the Zoom outages that were going on and other issues along that line as well. All right. So we've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of assignments, a lot of lab simulators. We'll talk about a little of those things as well. Any questions on that? No, hold on. I see there's a chat question. My chat window got dropped. Someone else was having that problem as well with the access code not working. Who else was having problems with the access code not working? Did they get it to work?
It was me, and it was just user error, and I was trying to do uppercase. So
Okay.
try lowercase.
Yeah, make sure it's all lowercase and see if that works, Dylan. All right. Okay, so again, we do need a little bit of an introduction to make sure, like I said, most of you guys have been trained, but not all of you had me for 430. So I do want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the syllabus and things along those lines. So one of the nice things about the class, and let's do this. That's what I want. You have the syllabus right here. And again, the syllabus is okay. It's important. It's our contract. It tells you what you need to do to be successful, and it's our rules for the class. It's nice here. There's a PDF version of it that you can print out as well. If you have trouble sleeping at night, you can read the student learning outcomes to help you to be successful that way. Reminds you of the materials. Most of you should have the materials necessary for this class. The one thing that might be, where's my annotations? Might be a little bit different for some of you, depending on who you had for 430, is the lab bundle. That's white and not going to help anybody. There we go. Is the lab bundle. The lab, most of the instructors on campus use the Ammerman lab manual, but unfortunately not all of them do. So if yours did not, then first, I'm sorry. But secondly, you will need access to it. We did look at getting custom printings of it. That would just be the second half for 431. However, because it is a custom print, it's actually more expensive. So it only is like $5 less than actually the entire book itself. So we didn't bother to do that. For those of you who are pinching pennies and concerned, one of the choices you do have is you can rent it from places like Vital Source or from Chegg. I know I've had many students use Chegg for their lab manuals. One of the things you're going to need to be doing is printing out the pages and turning them in as homework. One of the things I really like about this lab manual is it's very much like a workbook with a lot of activities in it. Each section has unit reviews, and those unit reviews have two components to it. They have a check your recall, which is basically where you're just regurgitating information. But they also have a check your understanding, which is where you have to do some kind of critical thinking to be able to answer the questions, where you have to fire a synapse or two. And I like those types of questions. And even sometimes they may show up in the question pools for our lecture exams. Chegg has never had a problem. I've never had a student have a problem with printing limits for the lab manual for that. I don't know about printing limits for Vital Source. So that is something that I would encourage you to look at before you did this. The other thing that some of you may or may not have, and again, it's not required in the sense that I'm not going to say, turn to page 15 in this book and, do the activity or tell me what you see or something along those lines. But as many of you know, right, this is a hands-on class and it requires hands-on activity. And that's one of the things we're not getting here in this environment. So one of the things that can truly help you to be successful is to have good illustrations of these things. A photographic atlas. Again, I have the older one. I couldn't find my newer one, but this is right. These are the things that had the pictures of the bones and stuff and bones features that you were using in 430. Having something like that is going to be very, very beneficial. And because again, not all instructors hit it quite as hard as I do, we are going to do a lot of microscope work in this class, which is a problem because none of you have microscopes at home. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be responsible for the information. So having a really good histology atlas with really good pictures of microscopic slides that do a really good job of describing what is in there and what you're looking at is something that is going to be very, very helpful to your success. So I strongly encourage you to get those types of atlases if you don't have them already. All right, questions on that? Yes.
Yes. So I already have the text from Pearson from my last semester.
Okay.
So I wasn't going to buy the bundle. I was just going to get like the atlas and the lab manual.
Yeah.
So the atlas, it can be like, there's no specific atlas, just any atlas we could find.
So here's what I will say. I like these two atlases very much. But the reason we have two bundles is because we use two different publishers. Okay, the publisher for our lab manual is different from the publisher of our textbook. So when they put these bundles together, they have, a handful of atlases that we can use, and we looked through them all to pick the ones that we liked the best. But they don't have to be this one. Any good one would work. So if you go to Amazon and an atlas has good reviews, or Barnes & Noble and has good reviews, that'd be fine. I don't care which one you use, but definitely having one will be something that would be useful. All right.
Thank you.
Great question. I love questions. Again, I'm a strong believer in questions. If those of you who had 430 know, my belief is that the only stupid question is the question not asked. If you have a question, if you're confused about something, I guarantee somebody else in the class is as well. So please raise your hand and ask that question. In the classroom, it's easier. I tell people that if you're really, really shy and really hate raising your hand and speaking up in class, give a buck to the person sitting next to you and have them ask the question for you. But I guess in this environment, you at least have the opportunity to text it. So you can text it in the chat if you really have a question and are afraid to speak up. But I love that Ashley's willing to raise her hand and ask the question. Yes?
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm so annoying. I'm trying to like poke the person next to me, but I don't think he's getting it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was me. Anyway, the lab manual. I was looking on Pearson. I didn't see the lab manual.
Because remember, the lab bundle is by a different publisher. This one I think is Morton.
Oh,
yeah,
I see what's happening.
Yeah, if it was all the same publisher, they'd put it all together in one bundle for us. The reason we have to have two bundles is because we have two different publishers.
Okay, so I can buy that Ammerman.
Yeah. Yeah, you can buy it from, it's in the bookstore. You can buy it that way, or if you wanted to go directly to Morton, Morton Publishing is who does the lab bundle.
Okay, I'll probably just do that.
Okay. All right, excellent. Any other questions on the resources that are available? Obviously, you have to have a web camera and a microphone to, again, participate in the exams required for the exams. It's nice when you guys have your cameras on during class as well, although I see only one person was brave enough to do that today. But I encourage it. Again, one of the things that I will remind you is that my lecture style is interactive. I expect to ask questions, and I expect for you to answer them. I expect you to ask me questions, and I will answer them, right? This needs to be interactive for it to be a good learning environment. It would be super easy for me to record these lectures and post them online and force you to go and watch them by yourselves, and that'd be awesome for me, because I could spend a weekend doing all the lectures for this class, and I could sleep the whole semester, and that would rock. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be here giving you my time, giving you my effort to give you the best learning environment. And I expect equal effort from you guys as well. So again, if you don't want to have your camera on, I'm not going to hold you to it during lecture, but I do expect you to be interactive. All right, so be active in the learning process so that you can be successful. Otherwise, I get mad and make the tests harder. All right, excellent. Now again, this is one class. So yes, I do record the lectures, and I will post them on YouTube. There are 3 things you need to remember about that. First is that if you're watching them on YouTube, you're not getting a chance to interact and ask questions, so it isn't going to be as helpful and useful to you that way. The other main concerns you have to worry about are technical issues. Sometimes I turn the recording off when we take our break, and sometimes I forget to turn it back on. Luckily, most of the times last semester, students caught it, and so they were able to turn it on, but you missed 10, 15 minutes or something like that, and if nobody catches it, then you may lose a whole section of the class. There could be technical issues with the recording. I had one lecture that didn't, once the lectures are done, it compiles, and it didn't compile properly, so that was an issue we had. That was back in the fall when everybody was in crisis mode, so I think Zoom's gotten a little better than then. But I would not rely, then the third thing is it takes me time to get the YouTube videos up, especially going around the weekend, or I'm actually during the week. During the weekend is usually when I get caught up on things. So Tuesday's lecture may not get up till Friday or Saturday. God, who's that ignoring guy? All right, excellent. So, so I would not rely on it. It is a resource to use because we're going to be sitting here for 4.5 hours. And even in the best of the conditions, no one can pay attention for 4.5 straight hours. I can't pay attention for 4.5 straight hours. I know you're not going to be able to either. So it's a great resource to go back to if you miss something or things along those lines. But being able to view them on YouTube is not an alternative to coming to class. Remember also they're going to be, I'm sorry?
Do you have like a YouTube channel that you post them to?
I do have a YouTube channel, and if you look, and I'll show you that in a minute, under the modules, under the study tools, is a link to that YouTube channel.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. But again, it's not an alternative to come into class. And the other aspect is if you're not coming to class and just watching the YouTube lectures, then as I mentioned, you're missing out on the daily quizzes. If there are group assignments you guys will be doing, and if you're not here to participate in those group assignments, you will lose points on that.
Right.
And so it is important to be here. All right, but yes, I do want, the same way I let students record, audio record the lecture during class so they can go back and listen to it, use it as a resource. I'm fine with that. All right, but it is expected. There is a participation grade. If you're not coming, you will lose points that way as well. All right, course evaluation, 5 lab exams, 5 lecture exams, and a comprehensive final exam. We will have the lab and lecture exams on the same day. So on those days, there will be no lecture. It will just be a test day. During those, you are required to take the tests during the class time. So you can take them in either order you want. You can take the lab exam first, or you can take the lecture exam first, whichever you like, but they all must be completed between noon and 4:35 on that test day. All right. Lab exams are going to be primarily identification type questions, images, pictures of models, charts, histology slides, all those types of things. Some of it will be the resources in the classroom. Some of it will be just random things. Again, my job is to teach you this material, not for you to memorize the pictures in your lab manual or your textbook. So will I use pictures from your textbook? Sure. Am I going to only use pictures from your textbook? No way. I expect you to memorize and understand this material no matter what. Lecture exams will have some multiple choice, but also some fill in the blank and essay questions. All lecture exams will be worth 100 points. Lab exams will vary on points depending on how much anatomy there is in it. This first section, the cardiovascular system, my guess is this test is somewhere going to be around 80 or 85 questions. Whereas the next one, where we're doing the lymphatic and endocrine system, probably be closer to 60 or 70. There is going to be one formal group presentation that you guys will be doing. You'll be giving a 8 to 12 minute presentation to the class, and that'll be in the second section of the class. So we'll talk about that more when we get there, and that's going to be worth 50 points. There's going to be all sorts of lab assignments, like I said, due at the beginning of class, quizzes that will be, some will be announced, most will not be. And like I said, that comprehensive final exam. The last thing is there are 15 points of participation. These are not extra credit. This is for being active in the learning process. Now, I'd love to say that that means you have to ask 2 questions a day, but again, it's not going to be quite like that. Oh, great question. I'll answer those in a second. Sorry, I didn't catch those. Okay, I'll talk about those in a second. This is not extra credit. This is a participation grade. All of you are here so far today, so everybody who's here today has maintained their participation points. You've got 15 out of 15. Congratulations, everyone here gets A's. A final exam is indeed mandatory. It is required. Well, it's not mandatory. This is college and you're adults. If you don't want to take it, you don't have to take it, but you're going to get a 0 on it. It counts towards the points in this class. This class we'll finish probably somewhere at 1,200, 1,100, 1,200 points in this class is where we'll finish at the end, and it's 100 points of it. So it is absolutely necessary to be successful. But I guess if you've pegged all the points in all the classes and you can take the hit of getting a 0 on it, you don't have to take it, but everybody else will probably want to. I will curve the exams slightly. Again, Proctorio doesn't allow me to do a true curve, but they can be curved. And the other thing that I will do is that your comprehensive final exam can actually replace your lowest lecture score. Right, as I mentioned, there are going to be lecture scores that you're going to get. Your first lecture exam, maybe because you're not fully prepared for the class yet, you get a 76 on that. And for the second one, you rally and get an 84. But then right before the third exam, grandma got married in Vegas. And you were too busy out hanging out and partying with grandma, and you ended up getting a 62 on that one. You rallied for the fourth exam, got it back up to a 79, and finished strong with an 82. Those are your 5 lecture scores, all right, all out of 100. You then take a final exam, and like I said, that final exam counts as a grade on its own, but also to reward you for learning and retaining this information, you can use your final to replace your lowest lecture score. And boom, this now just became an 81, and you just had 19 points added to your score. All right. Yes, Ashley. You're muted.
Okay, sorry, I tried to figure out how to unmute. So is the final comprehensive?
Yep. Everything we've talked about from day one to the end of the class.
Okay.
Yep.
Will you give us like little study guides for the test and stuff?
Sort of, but what I will remind you is two things. The final exam truly involves everything we've talked about in this class. So everything we've done in this class is part of your study guide for it. However, I will say that it is 100 multiple choice questions. So you just have to recognize the correct answer instead of pulling it out of the ether. Okay, so there is a big difference there.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, it's basically everything in the class. I may give you a list of some of the main concepts to remind you of the things that we've talked about, but ultimately it's everything. You are responsible for everything, not just what was on the tests, not just what was in the lecture, not just what's in the labs, everything. And yes, it only replaces the lecture exam because they're all worth 100. The lab exams are separate. Every lab exam counts. No leniency on the lab exams. Every lab exam counts. All right? Because they're worth different amounts. But I curve them, so you get that. So, how many people here play golf? All right, one person raised their hand. Everybody else is deadly silent. All right. Anybody here heard of golf before? All right, excellent. A couple people have heard of golf. All right. Nick, you raised your hand. If you hit a 300-yard drive, how many strokes does that count as?
1. I wish I could do that, though.
Me too. If you hit a 2-inch putt, how many strokes does that count as?
1.
Right, there you go. Notice in golf, strokes are strokes are strokes. Well, in this class, points are points are points. 2 points on a homework counts the same as 2 points on a lab exam, counts the same as 2 points on the group project, counts the same as 2 points on the final. Your job in this class is to maximize your points. All right? There isn't a chemistry quiz. If it says that there should be, I'm sorry that the syllabus quiz says that. I forgot to change that. I'm using the same syllabus quiz for both. 430's got a chemistry quiz, not you guys. Don't worry about that. Your job is to maximize the points in this class. I will do everything I can to help you. I'm curving the grades. You have participation. There's extra credit like the 5 for 5 and some other opportunities. All of these types of things to help you to be successful in this class. But ultimately, your points are going to determine your grade. So at the end of the semester, if you have 89.8% of the points in this class, what is your grade going to be? It's going to be a B. Exactly. Because without the curve, without replacing your final, without the participation, without the extra credit, you probably weren't even close. If with all that help, you still can't get 90% of the points, you don't get an A in this class. You have to get it. Now, the good news is it's not competitive. If every single person in this class gets 90% of the points, every single person in this class is going to get an A. Your grade doesn't affect anybody else's grade in this class. So again, while we don't have the ability to be in the classroom, one of the things you should very much be taking advantage of is forming groups and working together in this class to help you to be successful. Because if the more people that are successful, the more good grades we're going to get. Your grade doesn't hurt or help. Somebody else's grade doesn't hurt or help you. So if you work together with somebody else, you both improve and you both do better. All right? Questions on any of that? Yes, Ashley.
For the group projects, is
Yes.
it going to be like a presentation on
Yes.
Zoom, and we're going to be expected to work outside of class with these people?
Yes, so
Okay.
absolutely. Like I said, we'll talk about it more when we get to it, but the short answer is I will randomly forming groups in the classroom. You will have some classroom time to work on it, but it will not be enough. All right. I will also be setting up discussion boards for the groups in Canvas to allow for asynchronous communication. But again, even as free Zoom users, you can set up your own Zoom room, and 2 or 3 people can get together and meet in that for a short period of time, or you can contact by email or things along those lines, or use the discussion board, right? If you, me, and Ashley are in a group, we can decide if our schedules are totally out of sync with each other, that I'll work on part A, you work on part B, she'll work on part C. We can email the different parts to each other and put it together and do something like that. This is a much more formal presentation than what we did in 430. In 430, we did these little simple bone presentations and muscle presentations. No, this is an 8 to 12 minute audio presentation that you and your group will be giving. So it is more formal, but we're not going to have to worry about that till we're done with the cardiovascular system. So you get till September 17th to start worrying about that. That's when we'll be forming our groups. All right.
One last question about that.
Yes.
Will we need like visuals and stuff, like a PowerPoint or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, you will need visual. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint, but you will need visuals, yes. So again, if we're doing some kind of disease or something like that and your grandma has it and you want to show us a picture of your grandma, perfect, right? You'll need something visual. All right. I saw someone raise their hand. Yes.
I was just wondering, do you provide study objectives for the unit exams or like just for the unit in general?
Yes and no. For the labs, I do give more precise study guides because, for instance, you know, there are over 600 named blood vessels in the body, right? For the cardiovascular system, you're not going to be responsible for all of those. So I will give you a specific list of the blood vessels you are going to be responsible for on the exam, and we'll actually be talking about that today in lab. However, as far as lecture goes, I don't do study guides for the lecture because you are responsible for everything we cover in this class. And the problem with it is if I've done study guides in the past, and if I give a student a study guide, all that student does is study the study guide. And so what that means is if I ask a question on something that isn't on the study guide, the student gets mad. And so what I end up having to do is rewrite my entire lecture to make sure that everything that I talked about is on the study guide, and that's not conducive to me. So you are responsible for everything we talked about. You have the lecture outlines, you have the recordings, you have all of the resources and things we do. One of the important things to remember is what I love about anatomy and physiology is that it's hard. And because it's hard, I don't have to be tricky. Right? I will tell you X, Y, and Z is going to be on the exam because you need to spend a lot of time studying X, Y, and Z. If you look at the textbook, there's going to be a lot more things in the textbook than we have the opportunity to talk about in class, right? I see myself as a tour guide. My job is to show you the 10 most important things, right? A chapter may have 15 concepts in it, but we're only going to spend time on those 10 important things. And that's what you're going to be tested on. If there's something in your textbook that we don't talk about in lecture, there's no labs on it, there's no homework assignments involving it or anything like that, it's not going to be on the exam. So it should be very straightforward what the things are that you're going to be responsible for in this class.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. Great questions. Any others? All right, excellent. So that's it. Doom and gloom stuff. Let's do the doom and gloom stuff. Again, because of the pace, because of the format, because of things along those lines, the classroom rule is that there are no makeup exams or quizzes. That is the policy for the class, all right? However, that being said, I understand that real life happens and things happen and grandmas really do get married in Vegas. And so when you look at the schedule, if you see that there is a conflict or something comes up, then contact me as soon as possible. Again, obviously, you know, if grandma's eloping and you have to run off, that's one thing. And most people don't schedule their car accidents too far in advance. And if you're being rushed to the hospital, I shouldn't be the first person you call. But the sooner you communicate a conflict with me, the more likelihood that we will be able to make some type of other arrangements for you to help you with that. I can't guarantee it because of the pace of the class and because just the timing issues that are involved, but I will promise you that I will make every effort to make an exception so that we can make those accommodations to get you a makeup exam on those. All right. I will make every effort, but it's impossible to guarantee it. And so that's why the policy in the class is what it is. Now, that being said, most of the time I'm able to make those types of exceptions and we can make it work. But remember, you only get one exception. If you miss the second exam because you know you're going to be out of town that weekend, you know, grandma's getting married in Vegas or whatever it is, then if you miss any other exam for any other reason, you will get a 0 on those exams. I'll make an exception once, but there's just too much problem with maintaining the integrity of the class that I can't have independent study where someone's doing their test completely different from everybody else. So I will make an exception if possible. I will make every attempt to make that exception for you, but only once. All right, especially in a class like this where we only have 5 testing days. All right, the other doom and gloom is the academic honesty policy. American River College values academic honesty. Current policies prohibit dishonesty such as cheating, plagiarism, or knowingly furnishing false information to the college. There is all the obvious stuff that goes along with that. Don't be the student that I had this summer who took the first lecture exam and would look at the question, turned around to the big stack of papers behind them, looked at the papers, and then came back to write on the exam, right? They clearly got a 0 on that and ended up dropping the class. Those are the obvious things. The things, oh, my paper fell. I have not had a chance to look at many of the syllabus and proctorio quizzes for you guys as I had for for the 430 class. But one of the important things that can cost you points is not properly scanning your work area. A lot of people are doing a good job of showing their rooms, but I don't care what's on your wall. I care what's in your immediate work area. I have posted 3 good examples of how you should scan your work area. Make sure you look at that and see the proper way to do that. Don't have smart devices, no smart watches, don't have your phone on the counter, don't have another computer and computer screen on your table when you're taking the quiz. Yes, you tell me it's off, but who's to know whether it gets turned on during the quiz or someone comes off and turns it on for you or something like that. So it's just best to have a clear environment, that as much of a clear environment as possible. Show me your environment because it's going to help to maintain the integrity of it. All right. This is important because, again, the more clear I know your area is, the more lenient I can be on other things. I know this is a weird testing environment to be scrutinized like this. In the classroom, it's different. I get a clear view of you guys, and it's not that big of a deal, right? I appreciate that you're going to rub your eyes, or you're going to stretch, or you're going to cough, and those types of things are going to happen. They shouldn't be happening a lot, hopefully. But even if you do have a coughing fit, I don't want to have to give you a 0 on that. And if I know you have a clear workspace, then I know you're not faking it to try to look at a piece of paper to the side. So again, the more you can show me that you're maintaining the integrity of the class, the less scrutinizing I have to be on your viewing of your exams to do this. Again, it's unfortunately a necessary evil for this. Again, it's not ideal because even turning it off or turning it around, those are things that can be switched. It's not ideal. If it has to be done that, then yes, unplugging it and turning it around would probably be the best choice to do with that. All right. But again, I appreciate that if you have a turned off monitor to the side, even if it's turned off and unplugged, and I find you staring a lot to the side on that side, even if you're just staring off in space thinking, then that does increase the likelihood that something bad could be happening. So again, we were trying to do the best we can with this. The other things, but still, those are hopefully all the obvious cheating things. The other thing that I want to emphasize is I am going to encourage you to work together on assignments and activities to help to make sure that you do this. Again, it's very beneficial to work together. But when it comes time to writing an answer on a homework assignment, make sure you write those in your own words. I don't want the same paragraph copied 4 times on 4 different people's papers because you all work together. It's great that you work together, but to show me that you know something, you have to describe it in your own words, right? Make 1 bunny ear, make a 2nd bunny ear. The first bunny ear goes around the 2nd bunny ear through the bunny hole, pull it tight, right? I have described tying a shoe in my own words. I own that process. I know that process. And so again, you need to take the test by writing them in your own words, write homework assignments in your own words as well. Last doom and gloom, obviously, if you're not here, you're not hearing this, although I guess technically you'd be watching it on the YouTube channel. If you are not here and have not done the attendance quiz, is there anybody who's here who has not taken the attendance quiz yet? If you have not taken the attendance quiz, remember the code Dylan. Were you able to get it to work? The password for it is rock, all lowercase. Okay, well, as long as you got it to work, I guess that's the important thing. Just make sure your other tests work on that. So if you're not here today, not taking that quiz, you will be dropped. You will lose your priority on the wait list. I will have an attendance quiz on Thursday as well with a different password that we will use to check it as well. And I'm hoping to have enrollment issues finished by this week. After that, I don't want to have to keep taking. I don't want to have to keep taking roll every single day. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get that. There will be daily quizzes and things along those lines, but This is college. You're adults. You're responsible for your schedule. So again, I will get rid of people to make room for people who want to be here. But once you decide that you want to be here and then decide you don't anymore, you are responsible for that. If you decide you want to drop this class early because you don't like my teaching style or the time of day or any other reason, if you drop by September 6th, this won't count as a W. It won't count as one of your 3 attempts. Remember, you only have 3 attempts to take classes like this, and you will get a full refund. Once you get past September 6th, this will count as one of your 3 attempts, and you won't get a complete refund, but you can drop up to November 17th and get a W. So that is an option for you as well. All right, now the fun stuff, how you're gonna be successful. Don't miss class, don't skip any work. Be active in the learning process. Be here, ask questions. All right, participate, ask questions, work with your groups, be interactive. Like I said, I would be happy to record my lectures over a weekend and take the rest of the semester off. I'm not gonna do that. I don't want you to do that either. Complete all the lab exercises, even the ones that you're not turning in. As I mentioned, one of the things I love about our lab manual is it's like a workbook. And at the beginning of each section is a pre-lab. That pre-lab has vocabulary, matching activities, labeling activities. There's only a couple of those that you will turn in. Most of them you will not. But if you actually take the time to do them, they're actually going to be a really great study tool that will help you to be successful. So I encourage you to do that. Develop good study habits. Again, I shouldn't have to tell you this. You're here in 431. You were successful in 430 to get here. So you know what a class like this entails and requires. I know not every instructor is necessarily as vigorous as I am. So I know you're still not all necessarily on the same level of expectation, but again, you know what it requires. This is not a class you can cram the night before to an exam and be successful. It takes time. You need to spread it out. You need repetition to be successful. Come to my office hours. They're right before class, right? If you have questions, if you can't make that time, come to my other office hours on Monday and Wednesday. Email me, ask me questions so that I can help you. Take advantage of me, take advantage of your groups, and be courteous. Again, please, if you have your camera on, try not to be disruptive with it. I know there's some great backgrounds and stuff like that you can do, but try not to disrupt the class too much with those. I like if you have your microphones on so you can ask questions and things along those lines, but if you have a lot of kids and dogs and other things running around in your house, again, just try to limit the noise, try to maintain the learning environment so that it's conducive for everybody. All right? That is the syllabus. However, what I would say is my favorite thing on this tab isn't actually the syllabus. It isn't even the schedule either. What I love about this syllabus tab at the bottom is the course summary. Down here, you have a list of when every single assignment, every single homework, every single lab exam and lab simulator and thing like that is going to be due. So if you look, you can see everything we're going to be doing in this first section. We had an attendance day quiz today. On Thursday, your lab safety, the 5 for 5, Proctorio, Introductory and Mastering A&P. Tuesday, the Labster, the unit review, so on and so forth. Everything up to September 15th with our first lab and lecture exam. It has all the things here. You always know when the assignments are going to be and when they're going to be due. You have that on the main page as well in the modules, but it's here in the syllabus all in one place where it's easy to be able to see. I'll talk about Labster in just a minute. Labster is one of the lab simulators we're going to be using this summer to help to replicate some of the things we weren't able to do in the classroom. Right, you've got your pages here. This is where you get to the main page, but also this is where all the other pages like the Proctorio protocols are located. There's going to be an open lab. We'll talk about that in just a minute on Fridays. So there's the link. You can click here. And actually it has the link to get to that for Jeff Chingaris. Hopefully most of you have already taken advantage of that, but you'll have a chance to do that as well. Quizzes are here and all those things. However, where you'll be spending most of your time is here under the modules. Here under the Getting Started is again where I have those correct ways to scan and some of the introductory activities that have to be done. Here under the study tools are some great websites that either have some good gross anatomy pictures and models or also some histology stuff. This is also where the YouTube link is to my lectures, and this also is where a link to Friday's open labs are. But where you're going to spend most of your time is here in this portion. So here are the assignments. These are assignments like in the lab manuals and a cardiovascular handout that is in the lab handouts. This is where you will go to submit the assignment. So you'll come here and click on these, and then you'll submit the assignment here. You can scan it as a PDF and submit it that way. You can take pictures of them and submit it that way. However it is, this is where you will submit those assignments for things along those lines, for those types of activities. This is where the lecture slides are located for the class. I've posted them ahead of time so that you have them if you want to print them out or download them to your iPad to write on, or whatever it is that you want to do that way. I am a bit of a tinkerer, so there may be some minor changes to these things as we go, because I often, as we're going into a lecture, look at it, may change a word or switch some sides around. But for the most part, it's a good outline. But again, one of the important things to remember, it's not an alternative to coming to class. It is not my script. It is the breadcrumbs that we are following as we discuss the information. So you're responsible for everything we talk about in class and not just what's on the slides. The lab handouts are here, including the cardiovascular system exercise, a homework assignment you're going to have. The cardiovascular anatomy and histology, this is that study guide that I was telling you about, where it has a list of all of the structures of the heart, all the blood vessels you are responsible for. So that's it. That's all you need to know. Super simple, right? And that we're going to be responsible for on this particular test from an anatomy standpoint. It's actually a little more difficult than that. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I've got some study materials that can help you, a good blood vessel map that I found, some unlabeled pictures from your textbook, things along those lines that are here. One of the biggest differences between 430 and 431 is that there's a little bit more physiology, a lot more hands-on stuff that normally we get to do in the classroom. You get to measure ECGs of each other, you get to do respiratory volumes, all sorts of fun things like that that we're going to be missing out on. But we have these lab simulators. And so Labster is one of those lab simulators. Here is where you will go. When you click on this, it gives you a description of the activity, and then there is a link that loads it in another window. Like Proctorio, this has to be done in Chrome, so you will need to do this in Chrome to be able to do those Labster activities. This also is where you will see the PhysioX, which are going to exercises that we'll talk about in just a minute, and I'll show you those. One of the things that I want to emphasize is here in the lab simulators are where you're going to get to the Labster activities. When you look at your tabs, and this is one of those things that I think people get confused about, there is a Labster dashboard. When you click on the Labster dashboard, it shows you what activities you've done. I haven't done any of the Labster's activities, but this is not where you go to get to them. The reason it's useful to have those is because when you're in the modules and you're looking at this, the Labster activities have two requirements. You have to complete, for full credit, you have to complete 100% of the assignment, and you have to get it at least 80% correct. If you do not get it 80% correct, you will not get full credit for it. Now, the good news is it's a learning activity. You can do it 75 times if you want to. But so just make sure you complete the entire activity, make sure you complete it at 80%, and if you do that, you will get full credit for it. All right?
I have a question about that.
Yes.
Is it like homework or like a quiz? Like, are we allowed to use our notes on it? Or like you're recording it?
You are absolutely, these are learning activities. This is, instead of us doing a heart dissection in the classroom, these are the activities you're doing instead of that. So these are learning activities. You can have your notes, you can have your textbook, you can have the almighty Google. You're welcome to use all those things on them to help you to be successful.
Okay.
And honestly, especially with the Labster, Labster does a really great job of walking you through it. And if you don't have the information in there, if you don't have the information, if you don't know, the answer, it has the research in there where you can look and actually find it. So you shouldn't have to go outside of Labster.
Okay.
Labster is a paid site, but we pay for it. So as long as you access it through the lab simulators here on this, you don't have to pay anything. We as a school pay for access to it. So you are not paying anything for access to it. All right. Yes, I'll get to that in a minute. Last thing for now, with the homework assignments, most of the homework assignments, especially like the unit reviews, I'm looking for time and effort. Basically, I see homework for the most part as directed studying. All right, so as long as you're putting time and effort, you're getting out of it what I want you to get out of it. Towards that end, most of the homework is going to be graded for completeness. I'm looking for time and effort. If you put time and effort into an answer and you get it wrong, I don't want to penalize you for that. Now, if you leave a question blank, you'll get penalized. If the question is something A, B, or C, and explain your answer, and you just put C, well, that doesn't show me time and effort, and you'll lose points for that as well. What that means is as long as you fill out and can put the time and effort into your homework, you're going to get full credit for it. But that doesn't mean you had the right answer. So to make sure that you understand what the right answers are, I do post the keys. On a day that an assignment is due, I have the answer keys here for them for you to do that. Now, there are going to be some assignments that are graded for correctness. The Labsters are part of it. And again, even that, you only have to get 80% right for that. However, your cardiovascular exercise, so this cardiovascular exercise, which is the handout right here under the lab handouts, this one is graded for correctness. So this one does have to be completed correctly. And if you can, and wrong answers will lose you points on that. But if you go back and look at our whiteboard, I reminded you of that. Notice as we look here on the whiteboard in the activities, lo and behold, cardiovascular exercises is graded for correctness. So I'll always give you a warning of that on the schedule when we were talking about these things ahead of time so that you know when it is due. So that's not due till the 8th, just a couple days before the exam, and that one is graded for correctness. And it kind of is a review. That's why I have it done at the end. You need to know the muscle, the blood vessels first before you can put the pieces together. All right, so let's answer that other question. Coming back to the open lab. Hopefully most of you were able to take advantage of this before, but just like in the classroom, on Fridays, the classroom is open and you could come in and work with the models, work with the bones, work with the materials that were in there, because while we're gonna take time to go over them in class, it's not gonna be enough time to master it. So you could go onto campus and have your work at your own pace. Obviously, you can't go on campus anymore, but Jeff Chingaris, our instructional assistant, is still providing an open lab on Fridays from 10:30 to 8:30. He has a static Zoom address that you can go to, and you log in when you get there, tell him you're there so that he can log you in, and he will answer questions. So if you had a question about the, what's the difference between the main and accessory pancreatic ducts, then he can show you those on the model. Or he can show you, he'll have models, he'll have materials, he'll have histology, he'll have things like that that can help you. Now it is an open lab, so when you walk inside, he may be showing a femur to somebody from 430, but he does it for about 5 or 10 minutes and then he switches to the next person. So he's pretty good at jumping around material and bouncing back and forth between the classes. It is a great way to be able to study at your own pace and get this information. As long as you check in with him when you enter and check out with him when you leave, you will get credit for the time that you put in there. Again, make sure you check in with him. If you don't, then there's no proof that you were there, and so you don't get points that way. If you forget to check out, then you default to 1 hour, and so you won't get full credit for whatever time you put in there as well. So make sure you check in and check out with him. And for every hour that you spend in open lab, I will give you a point of extra credit, up to a total of 15. Now, I encourage you to go to more than 15 hours of open lab, but I cap the extra credit at 15 points. All right. And because here's the deal. Like I said, we're going to have about 1,200 points. 15 points of extra credit shouldn't make or break your grade. But if you put 15 hours of studying in the open lab, you're going to do so much better than 15 points better on the exam. It's going to be a huge, huge difference for you. All right. Questions on any of that? All right, the last thing that I want to talk about, and this is the other lab simulator we are going to be doing, is in the MyLab and Mastering. So I need to switch to show you this because everybody should have a 2 free week trial. Honestly, if you're in 431, you should have used this in 430. So when you log on, you should already have access. You should know how these things work. If you don't, then you need to call your 430 instructor and yell at them. Tell them I said that they did a horrible, horrible job with you. So we'll do this quickly because, again, you should already know all of this. That's what I want. When you go to the study area, this is where there's all sorts of great resources as you study by chapter. So if we went to right? The cardiovascular of the heart, it shows you where the E-text, the interactive physiologies are located, all sorts of different activities, flashcard maker, all sorts of labeling activities. There's all sorts of great resources here that can help you to be successful, including chapter quizzes and practice chapter exams that are there. The practice anatomy lab is a great resource, so that you have this nice pop-up that shows you both. You can see a real heart in the cardiovascular system and look through the layers of it in the models here, but we also have anatomical models of the cardiovascular system, and lo and behold, they have hearts very similar to the ones we have in the classroom. There are quizzes you can take and lab practicals you can take, all of those good things. And again, these are all good study tools. This is in my way. There. However, the other thing that's in here that may or may not have been used by your instructor are the interactive physiology and the PhysioX. Interactive physiology is basically kind of a self-driving tutorial on these. You may not have used it because notice there aren't that much for 430. This is what is here for 430, although there's a fair amount of nervous system stuff. But endocrine, immune, lymphatic, look at the cardiovascular system. There's some major things here. In fact, one of these has a worksheet that I'm assigning you and forcing you to do on the ECG just to encourage you to come here and look at these and make sure you understand what this resource that is here. The other thing that you're going to be responsible for is the PhysioX. PhysioX is a lab simulator. So back in ancient times, and by ancient times I mean when I was in graduate school and we were learning the cardiovascular system, they dumped a big huge bucket of frogs into the classroom. You had to go catch your frog, you had to pith your frog, which meant you took a very large gauge needle, inserted it at the base of the spinal cord and ran it down the spinal cord, destroying the spinal cord of the frog so that it was paralyzed and alive, so that you were able to then pin it down, peel back its skin, cut open its thoracic cavity, and watch its still live beating heart beat in its chest while you got a chance to play with it. And as incredibly fun as that is, right, it's not really practical anymore. And so we have these types of activities where you get to do it virtually. You don't get to actually virtually pith a frog. That would be a tremendous amount of fun. No, but here we have a pretty heart. You get to do with it. You get to manipulate it. You get to make all these changes. You're going to go through all the activities, and I went through it pretty quickly here. There's a pre-quiz and some other activities and things along those lines that you are going to do. So let's just cheat. As you go through all of it, you are going to submit your work. When you submit your work, at the end of it, it is going to give you a lab report. You are then going to come down to the printable, savable version. Put in your name. Print and save as. And again, you can just save it as a PDF to your desktop, and you are going to submit that PDF into the Dropbox on Canvas. So if we go back to Canvas, in here, under the modules. So again, PhysioX exercise 6. You would then submit that file, choose that file, put the file in there, and submit it that way. The nice thing about this, the PhysioX, you have to submit, everything else kind of syncs, but this one doesn't. It drops it in a Dropbox. It already has your name for it, so you don't have to worry about, typing who it is. Oh, you can write comments, right? Tell me hi, whatever as you're doing it. But you don't have to worry about giving me your name or anything like that because it drops it in a Dropbox for you, and you are going to do that for all 5 activities. One of the things that I want to point out, because again, people make this mistake, so I want to make sure to avoid it. There are 2 cardiovascular related PhysioXs. All right, 6 and 5. We are doing 6 first. So the first one that you're doing is PhysioX exercise 6. It is due on Thursday the 3rd. PhysioX exercise 5 is due on Tuesday the 8th. So we're doing 6 before 5. So don't get confused by that. There are 2 of them that are cardiovascular. Make sure you do 6 first. All right. Again, I know that was quick, but I think that was hopefully did a decent job of showing everybody everything that we need to do. If anything, if that was too quick, if any of that was completely foreign to you from 4:30, then come to my office hours and we can go over it again. But any questions on any of those? Yeah, about as fun as lobotomies, absolutely. Any questions on any of those or any of the things that you need to be successful, the logistics of the class before we finish? All right, so here's the game plan. Perfect, we did that quickly. We are gonna take our first break. So let's do this two ways. First, last call. Is there anybody here who has not done the attendance quiz? Because again, this is the last call. If you've not done the attendance quiz yet, you will be dropped from the class. You will lose your priority on the wait list. So going once, going twice. Is there anybody left who has not done the pre-quiz, the attendance quiz? All right, excellent. So then here's the plan. It is 12:58 right now. Let's go to 1:15. That'll give me a chance to talk to the students who are on the wait list and see who I'm going to be able to add. So what I'll tell you right now is if you're enrolled in the class, feel free to go take your break, come back at 1:15, and 1:15 we will start the lecture. If you are still enrolled, if you're still on the wait list trying to add the class, stick around for a minute. Let me figure out who's here and who's not and how many people I'm going to be able to add. All right, so I need a minute to be able to figure that out. And then once I figure that out, then I will announce who's able to be added today and who's not. Now, that being said, if I'm able to add you today, here's what you need to do. You are going to need to send me an email saying that I said you get to add the class, and then I will email you back the ad slip with the permission to add number. For those of you who have never added a class before, what you need to actually do is drop yourself from the wait list first. Then you will add the class using the permission to add number that I give you. Okay? So if I say you're going to be added to the class, email me, send me an email, do it now. I won't be able to do the ad slips till after class today, but I will get it to you after class so that you can then add the class. The way things work is the computer only updates once a day. So this ad slip is basically only going to be good for 24 hours. If you use the permission to add number today, then what will happen is tomorrow morning you will show up on my roster. If you wait till tomorrow to use it, then that means that you won't show up on my roster till Thursday morning. If Thursday morning you are not on my roster, if you've not used the ad slip and add the class yet, then you will lose your priority to add the class and you will not be able to add anymore. Remember, when you add, make sure to pay so that you don't get dropped. If you add the class and don't pay and get dropped, you'll lose priority. Okay? For those of you who are not able to add, what I want to strongly encourage you to do is to stick around for the rest of the lecture today. We're getting ready to start the lecture right when we come back from the break and get to the good stuff. And so if you want to stay in the class and want to be successful, I encourage you to stay and get that information. And then what'll happen is there's still a couple people. Again, I haven't checked to see who's here, but I have 3 people who's enrolled in the class who haven't gotten me their prerequisites yet. They'll have till Thursday to do that, or maybe they won't be here today. We'll see what happens. I'll add who I'm able to add. If I'm not able to add you today, then what I would encourage you to do is stick around, do all the activities, do all the quizzes, do all those things, and then come back on Thursday, and hopefully I'll have scared some people off and be able to add more on Thursday. All right? So let me see who's here and who's not, and then I'll be able to tell you who I can add. All right, everybody still there? All right, so the following 6 people I can add today. So again, if I call out your name right now, send me an email, and like I said, after class today, I will send you the add slip to be able to add that. And again, even if you're not added today, I encourage you to stick around. I encourage you to do all the activities, do everything you need to do to stick around and to hopefully be successful. And we'll see if I can scare off more people and add more tomorrow. So Levon, you're in. Vanessa, you're in. Cervantes, Gochong, Vu, you're in. So 1, 2, 3. Alexa Borg, you're in. Ryan McConnell, you're in. And Sandy, Seraphet, you are in. So those are the 6 that I was able to add. So it looks like there are just 3 more of you. So Tina, Alex, and Kirsten. Those are the next 3 on the list. Is there anybody else who's trying to add that whose name I didn't say?
Professor,
Yes.
which VU? Because I see there's on VU and then there's another VU in here.
Go Chung?
Here.
Oh, yeah. Vu's the last name.
Okay,
VUE. So, yeah. So,
Okay.
no, you're.
because I'm already
Vu,
enrolled,
you're
right?
Vu. Yeah, I have you enrolled. Yeah, so you're fine.
All right, cool.
Excellent. Yep. Sorry, I apologize for that. Yeah. No, you're enrolled.
Me
Yes.
too, Professor. This is Danielle Pham.
Danielle, you did not do the attendance quiz.
You know what? It says lost signal. It's been like saving for like a while.
So yeah, you were second on the wait list. I was surprised because you would also come to my 5 for 5, but when I asked, nobody said they hadn't done it yet. So go ahead and send me an email. I will go ahead and add you to the class. That'll put us one
Okay,
over.
perfect. Thank you.
You
Yeah,
did have
it's
priority, and rather than penalizing the last person, we'll add one more. So yeah, so it just hasn't completed. Is that what you're telling me?
yeah, I'm on the quiz, but it's not. It's saying that it's saving and it's not going through. So
Okay, you might want to close it and try to take it one more time and see if that happens, just so that I've got it there for that. But yeah, send me an email and I will add you to the class as well.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was surprised when I was checking you off because, like I said, because I know you came to my 5 for 5 already, so I was confused.
Yeah,
but-
yeah.
And then also because I asked. All right, perfect, excellent.
Thank
So,
you.
was there anybody else who I did not mention? All right, so it looks like we have 3 more people. We'll see if I can scare off 3 more people and be able to add more on Thursday. So hopefully that will be the case. All right. Otherwise, like I said, if you're one of those first 6 or I guess 7 now, send me an email and I will get you those ad slips after class today. And make sure you use them by tomorrow. Like I said, you do them today. Today you'll be on tomorrow. You'll be officially enrolled tomorrow. But if you wait till tomorrow, that'd be fine. But do not wait past tomorrow. If you wait past tomorrow, you will end up getting dropped from the class. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
How do we schedule the 5 for 5?
So ask me that again when we come back, because there's a lot of other people who haven't done it yet as well. So
Okay.
we'll talk about the 5 for 5 when I come back from break. But I need to go grab some caffeine. You need to go take a quick break. So I'll meet you guys back here at 1:15. But please, Vanessa, ask me that again on when we come back. Any other questions? All right. See you guys in I guess 7 minutes now. Oh, whoops. Oh, well. Apparently we had 15 minutes of dead silence. I forgot to pause the recording. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So last little bit of introduction, actually two last little bits of introduction that I want to talk about. First is the 5 for 5 meetings. Again, for those 5 for 5 meetings, to schedule an appointment, you don't technically have to schedule an appointment. All you need to do is come to my office hours. So this week, I've got office hours tomorrow from 12:35 to, or 12:45 to like 12, from 12:45 to about 1:45 after class, or come the hour before class on Thursday. If you come to my office hours, you don't have to schedule it. You just come. It's first come, first serve. If I'm meeting with someone, you will sit in the wait room until something opens up, and then I will let you in the order that you come. If my office hours don't work for you, then you can email me to try to make other arrangements. I've set up those office hours on times when I am available. But again, like most of you, I've got a very busy schedule. I've got 2 kids, I've got 2 dogs, I've got a wife, I've got all sorts of other things that we're trying to juggle. I will try to make other arrangements to be available, but I can't promise it. So those office hours are usually the best time. But if it doesn't work for you, then we can make other arrangements for when that is going to be. All right. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the extra credit. Again, I do have extra credit opportunities like the 5 for 5, like the open labs, but I don't do a lot of extra credit. Your extra credit shouldn't determine your grade first and foremost. But secondly, I don't give outside extra credit activities, because if you do poorly on the first test and you ask me for an extra credit assignment, every minute you spend working on that extra credit assignment is a minute you're not spending studying the material for the next section. And it's not what I'm looking for. So the open lab is directly related to study. The other thing that you can do for extra credit is the Science Success Center. It used to be called the Science Skills Center, but that was too easy for me to say. So they've changed it to the Science Success Center. For those of you who are not familiar with this is a program that they have set up relating to, based on a program that was set up in a medical school in some place, I think it was like Minnesota or something like that. There was a med school that had found that they were having a 50% attrition rate in their first-year students. Half of their first-year students were bombing out of med school, and they couldn't figure out why. So they did all this testing, and what they figured out was something we all know. Med students are smart, and that's the problem, right? Somebody who made it to med school probably didn't have to crack a book to be successful in high school. Many of them didn't have to open a textbook to be successful in college. So they had never learned how to read a textbook. They'd never learned how to manage their time, right? Those are those pains in the butts that slept in the back of the class and still got A's on the exam. It's exactly. They don't have study skills. And so what they did is they set up this program that all the incoming freshmen had to take, where they learned how to take notes. They learned how to, to organize their time. They learned how to read a textbook, prepare for an exam, and all those things. And we have done the same thing here and generalized it to science in particular. It's a great program. If you've done it before, it can be taken up to 3 different times. Basically, it's a half-unit class where you meet one-on-one with an appointment with an instructor for like 30 minutes a day, for once a week for 6 to 8 weeks. There are different activities and modules that they work you through. And at the end of that, you'll get 15 points of extra credit from me upon completion. But like I said, the study skills that you learn help you to be far more successful. They show that students who go through the Science Success Center get a full grade level higher on average than students that haven't gone through it. So it is a very, very valuable thing. I encourage you to do it. They're very flexible with the time, so you can find a time that works for you. Take that, go to the open lab, do both, but you can't double up on the extra credit. I'll give you 15 points for one or the other, but you do both, but you won't get credit for both. All right. All right, excellent. Finally, with that all out of the way, we can finally get to the good stuff. We are going to start our discussion with the cardiovascular system. And in particular, we are going to start with our discussion of the heart, right? We've kind of stolen some of the thunder a little bit. What are the organs of the cardiovascular system? This is the part where you answer me.
Heart.
Heart, excellent. Yeah, there you go. I gave you the first one. That makes it easy. Excellent, heart. Anything else?
Blood vessels.
Blood vessels, excellent. Although we can probably do a little better than that. What do we mean by blood vessels?
Arteries.
Excellent, arteries. Any others?
Capillaries.
Veins, excellent. Just the two? No, capillaries.
Capillary, yeah.
Excellent. Perfect. Oops, no. There, perfect. Oh, it helps if I spell capillaries correctly. I've never been a good typist. Always been one of those people. I took typing in high school for literally a week and then switched to photography. So I've never learned to type. And biggest mistake I made. All right, but let's be a little bit more precise than this. When we talk about arteries, veins, and capillaries, let's define them. How do you define an artery?
Something that takes blood away from the heart.
Excellent, absolutely. And here's the key word. All arteries carry blood away from the heart.
Except for the pulmonary.
Nope, even the pulmonary. You got the right idea. There is something wonky about the pulmonary ones, but all arteries carry blood away from the heart. You are correct, and I'm glad it wasn't mentioned. There is a general rule where most arteries do what?
Carry oxygenated blood.
Oh, I hate that term. Sorry.
Oxygen-rich blood.
There you go. Carry oxygen-rich blood. All right, so here are my two soapboxes. The first, oxygenated and deoxygenated. Deoxygenated means it doesn't have oxygen. Is there ever a state where your blood does not have oxygen in it?
No.
No. So it is oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood is the type of blood we are talking about. And too often, we describe arteries as being ones that carry oxygen-rich blood. And that is true for most of them. But the key word in that sentence is most. Most is not all. There is an exception. And as someone pointed out already, it is the pulmonary arteries that actually carry oxygen-poor blood, because where are pulmonary arteries going?
To the lungs.
To the lungs, to get oxygen, absolutely.
Away from the heart.
So, since most carry oxygen and most is not all, we do not want to use that as part of our definition. We don't want that as our definition. We want a good, clean definition that we can use, and that is the direction they carry the blood. All arteries carry blood away from the heart, and that, of course, means that what happens with veins?
To the heart.
Carry blood.
Yeah, all carry blood. Oops. Spell blood right. To the heart. And again, we could say it, so I'll go ahead and say it here. Of course, most carry oxygen poor blood. But again, most is not all, so we don't want to use that for our definition. And once again, it's those pesky pulmonary ones that screw things up for everybody else as well. Well, what does that leave for our capillaries then? What the heck does the capillaries do? What direction do they carry blood?
It's the exchange of materials.
Excellent, absolutely. So basically, capillaries do two things. They connect the arteries to the veins. They're basically the turnaround points. But as was pointed out, what's even more important is they are the location of exchange of materials. They are the only location. Let's even add that. That is the exchange where the exchange of materials takes place. Basically, the arteries and veins are conduits. What do I mean by conduits? Anyone know what I mean by conduits? Well, my neighbor right now is getting a lot of work done on their yard. And right now they're getting the irrigation put in. So I see miles and miles of PVC pipe, right? PVC pipe is used to carry water from one location to another. Does it modify the water? Does it change the water? Does it do anything for the water other than providing a passageway for the water?
No.
No. And that's what a conduit is. A conduit is just a passageway. Arteries and veins get blood away from the heart or to the heart. It's the capillaries where the exchange of materials take place, both into and out of the blood. And of course, what are we exchanging it between primarily?
Oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Well, okay, we'll talk about that in a second. Absolutely. Gases are one of the things that get exchanged. But, oops, if I spell it right. When things leave the blood, where does it typically go?
Into the tissues.
True, and absolutely. Between blood and the tissues, and more specifically, the fluids of the tissues, the interstitial fluid. Right? We here in California, or more specifically Sacramento, probably know this better than most. Because if you were not so theoretically to drink a massive amount of water in a very short period of time, to say when an antiquated video game system, right, then what ends up happening is you change the osmolarity of your blood, which changes the movement of water in your tissues, leading to cellular death, leading to organ failure, leading ultimately to death.
Hold your wee for the wee.
Exactly. Hold your wee for the wee. There you go. Exactly. Right? There isn't a password for the meeting. As long as you go through the canvas, you don't need a password to get into the meeting. All right. So exactly. So what is interchange between the blood and the interstitial fluid? Now again, well, then I'm confused. How are you asking the question if you're not already in it? What password do you need? If you go to, I think I have to stop sharing is the easiest way to do this. There. Excellent. All right. So exchange of materials, and we'll talk about gases and the other things that are exchanged with that as well. Oops, hold on. I did that in the wrong place, didn't I? Gosh darn it. Sorry, Ryan. Try that again. There. All right. So we have that exchange of materials that are taking place in the capillaries. We have the heart. We have the blood as the last organ in that. But we kind of were talking about the functions. And absolutely one of the key things is it is the transportation and exchange of materials that we were talking about. And let's talk about what kind of things are included in that. Someone already said gases, but let's be more specific. Which gases in particular?
Carbon dioxide and oxygen.
Excellent. Carbon dioxide and oxygen. Right. Both are equally important in the function of our body. In fact, in some ways, carbon dioxide is more important. Right, what do you do when you don't get your way?
Throw a fit.
Okay, you throw a fit. That's one thing you can do. What else can you do if you don't get your way?
Hold your breath.
Hold your breath. Absolutely. Yeah. You hold your breath. Absolutely. I don't want to go to school. And your wife says, tough, you have to teach today. Get out of here. Gives you a little kick, sends you on your way. Right? Absolutely. Can you hold your breath forever?
No.
No, eventually you have to breathe because you run out of oxygen.
No, because you need to.
No, it's actually what actually causes you to breathe is you build up too much CO2 in your blood, and so that actually forces you to breathe. In fact, when we get to the respiratory system, you'll actually get a chance to test this at home safely. But you've also signed the waiver, so if you hurt yourself, I don't care. All right, excellent. I'm kidding. What else besides gases is transported by the blood? Nutrients, excellent. What else?
Waste.
Hormones, I like that. I heard the waste too. Hormones, chemical signals, right? We'll put hormones and other chemical signals. Right, and it's not all good stuff. There's wastes in there as well. Excellent. What else?
Heat.
Excellent. Heat is a big one, right? If you were to get up and run around the room 16 times, or if you've ever been around someone who's worked out really vigorously, right? You don't even have to touch them. You can just get the hand near their skin and you can feel that heat coming off of them, right? Or when you're giving your presentation, okay, it's easier when we're in the classroom. If you were standing in a classroom giving a presentation and your pants fell down, would there be a change in blood flow, say, to the surface of your face as a result of that? And not only would your face get red, but would it get warm as a result of that as well? Yeah, absolutely. Heat's a huge one. There's one more huge one I can think of as well.
Bodily defenses.
Oh, I like that. That wasn't the one I was thinking of, but that's an excellent one. Right, our cellular defenses. I like that. Excellent. We kind of already talked about it, so I'll put it on the list. Water. Right? That movement of water, as we talked about. Water is the other big thing that it helps to move around and get into our interstitial fluid. And we talked about how important that can be as well. Right? Now, almost everything that is transported by the blood is transported where? Via what? Where is the nutrients, where are the hormones, where are the waste, where is all of that stuff transported? What part of the blood is what is responsible for transporting all of those things?
Not plasma, is it?
Hmm?
It's not plasma, is it?
Yeah, absolutely, by the plasma.
Okay.
Absolutely. I thought I am recording the lecture. Am I recording the lecture? The lecture's recording.
Shows recording for me.
Yeah. Shows recording for me too. We are recording. Yep. All right. Excellent. Almost everything. What's the one thing that isn't being transported by the plasma? I know you know. Oxygen. There you go. Oxygen is really the only thing, and technically that's not true. About 3%, well, not even that, about 1.5% of your oxygen that is dissolved in your blood is being transported by the plasma. But what primarily transport the oxygen?
Hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin, excellent.
Attached to the iron.
All right, attached to that heme group, the hemoglobin of the red blood cells. Oops, cells, perfect, excellent, perfect. There you go. So now we've talked about the function, we've talked about the organs that are involved. And we're going to start our discussion by talking about the heart. When you look at the heart, it isn't that impressive. It's a little bit larger than the size of your fist, about 5 inches across by about 3 inches in diameter. It doesn't look impressive, but when you think of what it does during the course of the day, it beats over 100,000 times each day, every day. It doesn't get Sundays off or every other Tuesday, right? No furloughing for the heart, constantly from the time you're born, really before you're born till you die. It is a massively, massively impressive function to it. And during the course of the day, it moves close to 8,000 liters of blood through your body. So like I said, it may not be impressive to look at, but its function is truly, truly amazing. All right, let's talk about the heart and where you would find it. There are lots of ways we could describe the location of the heart. Give me some of them. How would you describe the location? If you're going to call grandma on the phone and grandma asked you where you find the heart, what would you tell her?
Thoracic cavity.
Thoracic cavity, excellent. Oops. Thoracic cavity is a good description. What else could you have said?
Behind your sternum or deep to your sternum.
True, we could relate it to other structures, absolutely. Deep to the sternum, absolutely.
Pericardium.
Okay, it's located, so a thoracic cavity you could think of as maybe like an intermediate cavity location. Oops. I like that. But if we wanted to be more specific, we could say that it is in the pericardial cavity. Excellent. Where's that pericardial cavity found? In the mediastinum. Excellent. All right, the mediastinum These two, I would say, are specific cavities. And then if we wanted to be more general, as Liza pointed out, we could also have said ventral body cavity, right? So if you think about going from the most general to the most specific, those are all ways we could describe the spaces where you would find them. Notice also, while it's in all of these locations, is it directly in the center of the thoracic cavity, directly in the center of the mediastinum?
No.
Left.
No, notice it's a little asymmetrical in that it is on the left and also tilted to the left. And is it straight in the middle as far as anterior, posterior?
No.
No, as
No.
you can see in the bottom picture there, it is anterior in the cavity and tilts anterior. So basically, the heart is like a cone, right? A cone-shaped structure. If you think of a cone-shaped structure, and we'll deal here with my limited drawing skills, a cone-shaped structure has a large flat base, and then it has a large top, an apex. So it has an apex and a base, and that is the shape of the heart. However, that isn't how the heart is oriented. As you can see, the apex of the heart is actually inferior, and the base is actually up here at the top. In fact, the base is where all of the large blood vessels feed into or out of the heart. So you have this cone that is pointing down, but not only is it pointing down, but it points to the left, and it also points anteriorly. Notice if you look right here, my arrow, this point right here, notice the apex of the heart, because it points forward, because it points to the left, it actually pushes up against the thoracic cavity, right between the 5th and the 6th ribs. You can actually feel the heart pushing against your thoracic cavity at a point, as you see here, that they've illustrated and identified as the point of maximal intensity. Basically, this point, find your left nipple, go down about inch and a half from your left nipple, and you can find that right in between your 5th and 6th rib, you can actually palpate and feel the apex of the heart pushing against the wall of your thoracic cavity. All right? Excellent. Any questions on the gross anatomy or its general location? Not the gross anatomy, but its general location. All right, did all that, did all that, did all that, did all that. Perfect, excellent. Oh, and here's a pretty picture. Quick question. What plane of section is this?
Transverse.
Transverse section, excellent. Is this a superior or an inferior view?
Superior.
Superior.
Okay, I've heard 2 superiors. I see a 3 superior. Everybody comfortable that this is a superior view?
Yeah.
Anybody think inferior? How would we know?
The aortic arch.
Yeah, well, so what? Oh, yeah, true. That's one way. You need to orient yourself on this as well, right? This is a transverse section. Is the individual that this was taken from, would they be, what position would you say this person was in relation to the board right now?
Well, there's their
Uh,
spine up top.
All right, so would they be prone or would they be supine? Prone. They'd be laying on their stomach, right?
Mhm.
Excellent. And if the left lung is over here on the right-hand side, would this person's head be in front of you, or would their head be behind the computer screen?
In front.
In front. Excellent. So yeah, this basically, we cut a person and remove the top. So we are looking down, and this is indeed a superior view. Excellent. Perfect. We want to get used to looking at the body from different points of views, and this is a great way to do this. And again, here we see that pericardial cavity. Remind me again, what type of membrane forms that pericardial cavity?
Serous.
Serous membrane. Excellent. And luckily, we all remember our anatomy of our serous membranes because we're going to talk about histology in just a second here as we work our way through this. So that's going to be really useful and helpful information. Excellent. So here we see it's anterior, and we're seeing the superior view of the heart that way. Excellent. Now, what we want to do is talk about the anatomy of this. We're going to take a slice through the pericardial sac, through the pericardial cavity, and into the heart, kind of like the pretty picture that we have here. However, I want to do it on the whiteboard first so that we can actually draw this out in better detail. So, excellent. Let's go ahead and switch to the whiteboard and do our pretty drawings. Excellent. So, we are going to start from superficial and then go deep. So as we know, we have our pericardial, that's going to be way too big. So let's keep this small, switch to black. The first component, what helps to form that pericardial cavity, is the pericardial sac. Oops, sac. Excellent. The pericardial sac actually is comprised of 2 layers. So this is forming the surrounding structure of the heart. Now, someone already mentioned that it is going to be formed by a serous membrane. Excellent. And as we mentioned, how would you identify this specific serous membrane based on its location? The serous membrane that is a component of the pericardial sac, based on its location, how would you identify it?
Pericardium.
Okay, excellent. It is the pericardium. That's a good start. How many pericardiums are there?
2.
Excellent. How do you tell them apart?
It's on the outside and one is lining the organ.
Excellent. One lines the organ and one lines the cavity or forms the cavity. What do we call the one that lines the cavity or forms the cavity?
The
Endocardium.
Nope, not the
Parietal.
endocardium.
Parietal.
Parietal. There you go. We call it the parietal pericardium. Excellent. So when we are looking at our pericardial sac, it is comprised of a serous membrane that we could also refer to as the parietal pericardium. But it also, and let's go ahead and do this now. Here, hold on. I need some drawing room, so I need to juggle around some of the windows I have open, like chat windows and the pictures and stuff like that. Excellent. All right. Our parietal pericardium, as I mentioned, happens to be a serous membrane. And the good news is we know serous membranes, like all membranes, are comprised of epithelial tissues that sit on top of connective tissues. And what was the epithelial tissue that forms the epithelial layer of all, oops, I'm doing this in the wrong direction. What epithelial tissue forms the superficial surface of all serous membranes?
Simple squamous.
Simple squamous, excellent. What do I'll call a simple squamous epithelial tissue that is part of a serous membrane based on its location? I know all of you had me for 4:30. We're thinking you would hopefully never have to do this again. Nope. What do we call a simple squamous epithelial tissue that is part of a serous membrane? What was the term? I think some of you may have actually said it already.
Mesothelium.
Mesothelium, excellent. Excellent. And what connective tissue forms the base of a serous membrane?
Areolar.
Areolar, excellent. Areolar connective tissue, perfect. So what we have here, and I'll try to draw it simply, we have a single layer of flat cells, and then we have this areolar connective tissue cobwebby stuff like that, that forms the Parietal Pericardium, part of the pericardial sac. Now, areolar connective tissue, simple squamous epithelial tissue. Do either of those things sound like very big, very strong, very sturdy things?
No.
No, absolutely not. So notice we said the pericardial sac is comprised of 2 layers, the serous membrane and a fibrous layer. And so that fibrous pericardium is basically made up of a thick, dense, irregular, I think I have room to fit this in,
Yes, it is. I do remember
connective tissue. And that's going to give more structure, more support to it. So if we cheat and do it this way. Now let's do it this way. So we have this big, thick, fibrous layer providing some structure and support for our fibrous pericardium and our parietal pericardium.
Serous membrane.
Okay. Questions on that? So this is our pericardial sac. If we cheat and go back to the pretty picture, right here, we see these 2 layers that we were just talking about. There's my annotation. There it is. So here is that fibrous layer, and here is that parietal pericardium. But remember, we know one more thing about our serous membranes. They have 2 layers, a visceral layer and a parietal layer, but we also know they connect to each other. And so that we actually see here. We actually see where the parietal connects to a blood vessel and then lines the surface of the organ. So when we go back to our microscopic anatomy associated with the heart, when we talk about the heart and the heart anatomy, that heart anatomy has 3, or microscopic, let's be more specific, microanatomy, has 3 specific layers to it. And that first layer of the heart is still that serous membrane. It is going to be that serous membrane. However, this one, how are we going to identify this one? It's not going to be the parietal pericardium. What's it going to be? Visceral pericardium. Excellent. It is still a serous membrane. Now, remember, one of the things that we know is anatomists hate us. They love to give many names to things that are the exact same thing, and this is a perfect example. The upper layer, the superficial layer of the heart, is the visceral pericardium. It is a serous membrane, but they have also referred to it as the epicardium. So that's another name we can use for it, but it means the exact same thing. Both are acceptable terms. And here's the good news. It's the exact same membrane as the parietal pericardium. So when we look at it, we know once again, it's gonna, I'm gonna cheat here. Grab this and move this up out of the way. We know that it is gonna start, actually let me put there, with a superficial epithelial tissue, and on top of it, sitting on top of a specific connective tissue. And what epithelial tissue forms the uppermost layer of the epicardium? If it's the exact same as the parietal pericardium, what would the epithelial tissue be?
Simple squamous.
Simple squamous, absolutely. And guess what we call that simple squamous epithelial tissue based on its location?
Mesothelium.
Mesothelium. Excellent. And guess what connective tissue sits underneath it?
Areolar.
Areolar connective tissue. Perfect. So if we were to draw that, And I'll use the same colors because they're basically the same membrane. We have our areolar connective tissue. Oh no, oops, wrong. That was the fibrous pericardium. I need this to be brown. We have our simple squamous epithelial tissue, a couple flat cells, and my squiggly areolar connective tissue for my visceral pericardium. Excellent. Let's give them nuclei. I like nuclei. There's a nuclei, there's a nuclei, there's a nuclei, there's a nuclei. Excellent. Perfect. Notice these two membranes don't touch. There is a space in between. And what would we call this space in between? What is it?
A lumen?
True, it would be a lumen. It is a lumen, but we can give this lumen a specific name. What would this specific space be?
Pericardial.
Pericardial what?
Cavity.
There you go, pericardial cavity. So this space in between is the pericardial cavity. Now, if I remember correctly, serous membranes do something. What do serous membranes do?
Lubricate.
Lubricate, reduce friction, provide protection that way. By filling the pericardial cavity as much as it possibly can? Well, let's go back.
No.
How does it lubricate? How does it reduce friction? What does it do?
Thin layer of serous fluid.
What does a serous membrane do? You guys are overthinking it. What does a mucous membrane do?
It's on the surface of the
lubricates, allows them to slide.
Yes, and it does it. A serous membrane produces serous fluid. All right?
Mm-hmm.
So these membranes produce serous fluid. Now, do we want to fill this space with serous fluid?
No.
No, we just want a thin layer. So notice, and I'll cheat and I'll do this in blue. Oh, yeah, okay, that works too. Notice we are going to want a thin layer of serous fluid that is going to line this space. So there's this thin layer of serous fluid that lines this space. There is a thin layer of serous fluid that lines this space. That lines these surfaces. Now, is this the only place in the body we find serous fluid?
No.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So a thin layer of serous fluid lining the surface of a serous membrane has a name based on its location. What do we call a thin layer of serous fluid lining the surface of a serous membrane?
Transudate.
Transudate. Excellent. Perfect. And if that word is new to you and you've never heard it before, I demand that you email your 430 instructor and demand a refund. Excellent. There you go. Perfect. We've talked about our epicardium. We've talked about our pericardium. This is the first layer of our heart and the pericardial sac. Questions on that? And 2 layers up here. 1 and 2. Excellent. All right, things get a little easier from here. What's the second middle layer of the heart?
Myocardium.
Excellent. It's the myocardium. Perfect. And it is primarily, heck, mostly comprised of what?
muscle.
Although we can do better in 431 than just muscle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cardiac muscle.
Cardiac muscle.
Cardiac muscle. Yeah.
Excellent. Cardiac muscle. Big, huge, thick bands of cardiac muscle. Remind me again some of the characteristics we know about cardiac muscle.
Striated.
Striated, excellent, right? Which is going to affect how it contracts. Luckily, learning how a skeletal muscle contracts is going to help us to understand how a cardiac muscle contracts. when we get a chance to talk about it in this. What else do we know about it besides being striated?
It's electrically connected or something.
Yeah, how do they work together as one by being electrically connected? They form electrical synapses. What was that type of cell junction that allowed for those electrical synapses?
The desmosomes?
No, it does have desmosomes too. It's going to hold them together. Remember, the desmosomes are the spot welds.
Junctions.
Gap junctions. There you go. Excellent. We have those gap junctions that are going to hold them together. They're striated. What shape are they again? The cells themselves? Branch shape. Excellent.
Branch shape, yeah.
Branch shape. Perfect. Give me at least one more thing you know about cardiac muscle.
Involuntary.
Involuntary. Excellent. In fact, some of the cells are actually autorhythmic. Excellent. Where do you find it?
Uninucleated.
I'm sorry, say again, Oksana?
Uninucleated.
Uninucleated, excellent. Only found in the heart. And what's its regeneration rate like?
Nothing.
Yeah, pretty much non-existent, absolutely.
Not
Yeah.
existent.
Doesn't really regenerate. Excellent. We'll talk about more of those things too, but that's a good starting point. Excellent. Now, notice there was that pesky word I threw in there. Mostly. Because in the myocardium, because of the branching shape, there is a lot of space in here. And this space in here helps to allow for a large amount of connective tissue. And in specific, some collagen fibers that'll form in here. And so also here in the myocardium, what we are going to find is we are going to find what we call a fibroskeletal system. There's a fibroskeleton, which is basically this fibrous network that helps to give some structure and some integrity to the heart. In particular, this is especially thick around the valves that helps to give more support and structure to it. So it's kind of some nice foundation. Many years ago, one of the things that they were interested, because hearts don't regenerate, one of the things that they were looking at doing is actually taking hearts out of cadavers, dissolving away the muscle tissue from them, and just leaving these fibrous skeletons. And then what they were trying to do is then repopulate it with cardiac muscle cells. If you think about it, one of the big issues with a heart is getting a transplant, getting the right tissues. But if I was able to use your cells to make heart cells, cardiac muscle cells, and implant this fibrous skeleton, I could grow a new heart on this skeleton, and then that, because I used your cells, it would be compatible. That research has stopped, not because it wasn't successful. They had some success, but they found something even better than the fibroskeletons. Does anybody know what they're using now to try to make these hearts?
Stem cells, maybe?
No. Well, you use the stem cells for the muscles. They're using 3D printers, exactly. Rather than have to, because even again, with a cadaver, I have to make sure it's the right size heart for you. But if I can 3D print a fibrous skeleton that is the right shape for your chest, and then take your cells and grow it on it, I can maybe eventually make you your own heart. Right? You can keep a couple in storage in the freezer. All right. Excellent. So mostly cardiac muscle in here, but there is that additional fibroskeleton found in this location as well. And then lastly, we have the innermost layer, the third layer. This, of course, then opens up to the chamber, and the chamber contains what inside of it? Not your question. What's inside your heart?
Blood.
Blood. There you go. Excellent. This is going to be the blood that's inside. Now, right, do we want the blood to move smoothly, or do we want the blood to have a whole bunch of turbulence inside it as it goes through the heart?
Smoothly.
Smoothly. We want it to move smoothly, absolutely. So we need a nice smooth surface to the inside of it. So what would we call this innermost layer that lines the inside of the heart?
Endocardium.
This is indeed the endocardium. Excellent. And what type of tissue do you think you'd want to have lining that endocardium? something that would allow smooth movement across it, but because it's deep in the heart, we don't necessarily need a really big tissue layer. So what might be useful for something like this?
Simple squamous.
Simple squamous, absolutely. So we're going to have a simple squamous epithelial tissue lining the inner surface. Of course, we can't have a simple squamous epithelial tissue just hanging out by itself. So it needs a little bit of connective tissue to help to support it and hold it in place. And what type of connective tissue might be useful for something like that?
Areolar?
Areolar.
Areolar, there you go. Excellent. So let's draw that. Excellent. And then one thing about this endocardium, that smooth surface, not only do we want that smooth surface in the heart, but we want it in the blood vessels as well. So this actually extends out of the heart and is continuous with the endothelium of the blood vessels. So basically, the innermost layer of the heart is essentially the same thing that forms the innermost layer of the blood vessels as well. A simple squamous epithelial tissue with a little bit of areolar connective tissue anchoring it in place. I, with my amazing drawing skills, have done an amazing job of showing you this. But let's do it again with the pretty pictures from the textbook. As we've talked about here, there we go, give me that. We have that outermost pericardial sac, that fibrous pericardium, and then the serous pericardium that is comprised of the simple squamous epithelial tissue and the areolar connective tissue, that mesothelium. And again, it is lined with that transudate, that serous fluid, thin layer of serous fluid on there. Then we have our pericardial cavity, the space in between. And here's the pretty picture that shows that. Then as we look at the layers of the heart itself, we have our epicardium, which is also the visceral pericardium. Again, a simple squamous epithelial tissue on top of an areolar connective tissue. Our myocardium, mostly cardiac muscle, but again, some of that fibrocartilaginous skeleton in there as well. Notice that unlike smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, where the fascicles are typically long, straight, narrow things, notice here the fascicles form figure eights and bundles, circles, because again, the job is for it to be an efficient pump. And so here we see some more pictures of how that muscle is organized in there. And that fibrous skeleton. And then the innermost endocardium, which lines the chamber. Here we see a simplistic view. Here I think is actually the pretty picture from the textbook. And notice what they've done is pretty much exactly what we did as you look at this here. We see the outermost fibrous layer, that dense irregular connective tissue forming the fibrous pericardium. We have the areolar connective tissue, our simple squamous epithelial tissue forming the parietal pericardium. We have the cavity in between. Notice they didn't show us our transudate, the thin layer of serous fluid on there, but they have the cavity. And then we have our simple squamous epithelial tissue on top of the areolar connective tissue. Again, that mesothelium that we're seeing there. Here, we're seeing the cardiac muscle cells, and notice because between the branching, we can see the fibers of that fibrous skeleton that's going to be in there, that connective tissue that is in there, and then another areolar connective tissue, and another simple squamous epithelial tissue, that endothelium that is forming the endocardium. All right, so again, what I did, your book shows just as easily. And again, this is a good reminder of three things. One, histology is important. We're going to do a lot of it. It reminds us again that a lot of things are given names based on their locations. We need to know those locational terms. And it helps us to understand the anatomy and organization of the heart. All right. Questions on that?
I just got a curiosity question.
Yes.
On the picture of the heart on the top left, what is that fat? It looks like a fat-looking substance.
Yes.
It is.
So there are two things, and again, unfortunately, if we were doing the heart dissection, you would see this. There is fat that will accumulate on the outer surface of the pericardium, but often where the blood vessels are located, fat will cover the blood vessels on the surface of the heart, on the epicardium as well. So it's not uncommon to see fatty deposits that form around the blood vessels on the surface of the heart as well.
Is that for protection or?
My guess is it's probably not so much for protection as more of the kind of thing that this is very nutrient-rich blood, and so as it leaks out of the capillaries and stuff, the adipose may accumulate and store those resources. My guess is it's probably more related to that. Yeah. All right. Great question. Any others? All right. Excellent. All right. Oops. Get rid of those. Perfect. Now that we've talked about the microscopic anatomy and everybody is comfortable with that, because I'm sure you're all super comfortable with that, and those are all terms that you all completely remembered, let's talk some about the gross anatomy of the heart. Here we see what a real heart looks like, but what I find sometimes is best is to do a more simplistic visualization. Now, again, as I mentioned, one of the things that we can clearly see here is, again, we see that base of that cone up here and the apex of it that is down here. And as I mentioned, all of the great vessels, all of the blood vessels that either feed into or out of the heart connect to the base. However, sometimes when we're talking basic anatomy, I find it a little bit easier. And then I think about it, even though this looks horrible, let me go ahead and save this picture. Oh, that's what I want there. Perfect. So I can clear that. Sometimes I find a schematic view works a little bit better. So with a schematic view, let me take a few minutes here to draw my absolute positive direct replication of what the heart looks like. There you go. Perfect. And as we talk about the heart, as we just mentioned in the previous picture, it contains chambers. And how many chambers again? 4. Excellent. So let's take our heart and divide it up into 4 chambers. Excellent. We have our 2 superior chambers. How do we identify our superior chambers?
Atria.
Atria.
Right.
Excellent. Right and left. And this one over here where I'm at right now, which would this be? In anatomical position, would this be the right or the left?
Right.
Excellent. So right atrium. Atrium being the singular, atria being the plural. So let's put that here for now. And that makes this one over here then the left. Perfect. And the inferior chambers, what would they be?
Ventricles.
Ventricles. Excellent. And so again, this one here is the right. Ventricle being singular, ventricles being plural. Excellent. So we have our 4 chambers, 2 superior, 2 inferior. There are some differences in their functions. The atria, I should say more specifically, are involved in receiving blood to the heart, whereas the ventricles are involved in pumping the blood out of the heart. Excellent. And let's move that so we can see it a little bit easier. Excellent. Perfect. Excellent. The right atrium receives blood from where?
Vena Cava.
True. Okay, those are the blood vessels, but I was more thinking what parts.
Veins.
Okay, these receive blood, so all the veins feed into the atria. So where does the blood to the right atrium come from? You are right. You are correct in that there are some large vessels. So let's draw those. One of those large vessels feeding into it is indeed the Vena Cava, but superior Vena Cava. Oops. And anytime we have a superior something, guess what else we have?
Inferior.
Inferior something. Excellent. Oops, that went off the screen. There you go. An inferior Vena Cava. And again, I know these aren't quite in the right location, but we'll cheat and put them. Actually, you know what? We're going to do it this way instead. Superior, we'll just have them all feeding in one place. Superior Vena Cava and inferior Vena Cava. Excellent. And I see someone else already basically said what I answered the question that I was asking. Where these get their blood from is basically from the body. This is blood coming back from the body. Or if we want to be fancy, like Alexa, she's very fancy, it is systemic blood. Perfect. Excellent. This is the blood coming back. And typically, what is the condition of this blood coming back from the body?
Oxygen poor.
Oxygen poor. Excellent. So we have oxygen poor coming back from the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. There's actually a third blood vessel, but that gets us further down the rabbit hole than I want to go right now. So we will save that for later. But when you're working on your cardiovascular exercises, make sure you get all three. And let's cheat. Whoops, let's totally cheat by doing that, opening that up. Perfect. Excellent. All right. Conversely, our left atrium receives blood from where?
Lungs.
Excellent. This is blood from the lungs. I'm going to be back from the lungs. Excellent. And then there are actually four primary pulmonary veins that feed into it. And so this is, oops, if I spell from correctly. Coming back from the blood, from the lungs, or what we would call our pulmonary blood. And as we talked about, it's the pulmonary blood that screws things up for everything else. Because while most venous blood is oxygen poor, what do we know about the pulmonary blood coming back to the lungs?
Oxygen rich.
Oxygen rich.
Excellent. Perfect. So we now know where our blood is coming back to. Oh, and I guess I said it, but I should have made you say it. It is indeed the pulmonary veins that, veins that are carrying the blood back here into the right atrium. Our right ventricle then pumps blood out, and when it pumps blood out, where does it pump it out to?
The left ventricle goes to the body.
Right.
True,
The right
but
goes
where's the
to
right one go?
Pulmonary arteries.
Pulmonary trunk.
There you go. Excellent. It feeds into the pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary trunk. Trunk is an important word to learn in this class. Trunk is basically a short, typically large, so it's a thick artery that is short and branches almost immediately. So it's a relatively short one. And our single pulmonary trunk is what attaches to the right ventricle, but it branches almost immediately to form what blood vessels?
Pulmonary arteries.
Pulmonary arteries.
Pulmonary arteries. And how many of those do we have? How many?
Two.
Two. I just wrote it on the board, so that should have made it easy, even if you weren't sure. Why do you have two pulmonary arteries?
Because you have 2 lungs.
You have 2 lungs. There you go.
Hopefully.
Exactly. Right. And so, of course, what is the condition of this blood that is being pumped to the lungs?
Oxygen poor.
Oxygen poor.
And again, it is oxygen poor, which again is the one that screws things up for our arteries. Here we have arteries carrying blood away from the heart, but they are oxygen poor. And so notice what happens basically. The right side of the heart is a pump where it receives oxygen poor blood from the top and then pumps it out the bottom. So if we cheat and use my arrows, and we'll use blue because we're dealing with oxygen poor blood. Oh, that is way too big. Let's try that again. Blood comes in to the right atrium, down to the right ventricle, and out to the lungs. It then comes back from the lungs, as we were talking about now, oxygen rich. It is going to move to the left ventricle. And the left ventricle is going to pump it out. And when it pumps it out, what blood vessel does it pump it out into?
Aorta.
Ascending aorta.
Ascending aorta.
There you go. I like that better. One of the things to remember about the aorta is kind of like Main Street. It's big and it's large and it's huge. And so one of the things we do is we divide it up into different parts. Like you have East Main Street and West Main Street or something like that, because different parts serve different functions. When we talk about the movement of the blood in the body, we're going to take the aorta, a single blood vessel, and we're going to actually break it up into 4 pieces. And we'll focus on those 4 individual pieces because each one is going to have different blood vessels that come off of it, and each part is going to distribute blood to different parts of the body. So when giving driving directions, which is definitely one of the things you're going to want to worry about doing here, we will want to identify them as different individual blood vessels. So yes, truly it is one blood vessel, and that one blood vessel is the aorta. But we want to be more precise. And so as you guys mentioned, the first part of it is the ascending aorta. Just out of curiosity, anybody know the name of the other 3 parts? The ascending aorta feeds into the
Thoracic.
Before that.
Or descending aorta.
Before that.
Abdominal.
Ascending aorta feeds into the
Aortic arch.
Aortic
arch. Aortic arch then feeds into the
Thoracic.
thoracic, and the thoracic feeds into the
Abdominal.
abdominal, right? Now, descending isn't a bad answer. Descending, though, is basically the thoracic and the abdominal together. Both of those go down behind the heart, so both of those are part of the descending. But dividing that descending up into the 2 parts, thoracic and abdominal, is more meaningful. And what do you think the dividing point between the thoracic and the abdominal aorta is?
The diaphragm.
Thoracic cavity.
The diaphragm, absolutely. The part of it above the diaphragm is the thoracic, the part of it below the diaphragm is the abdominal, and the 2 of them together form the descending aorta. Okay? But rather than using descending, if you talk about thoracic and abdominal, you can ignore the word descending, because again, it allows us to be more precise. Excellent. And so, of course, here we have now oxygen-rich blood that is going to leave the heart. And as it leaves the heart, where is it going? Not your question. When it enters the ascending, yeah, to the body. Excellent. Leaves the heart, going to the body. Perfect. So notice we started identifying some of the anatomy associated with the heart, but notice something else we've looked at about it is too. The heart is one anatomical structure, but physiologically, it's really 2 things. It is 2 independent pumps that are involved in moving the blood through our body and around in our body. The right-hand side deals with the oxygen-poor blood, and the left-hand side deals with the oxygen-rich blood. So we have these 2 pumps that work together to serve that function. And we see some of this in the anatomy of them. Let's start easy. Is there a big difference anatomically between the ventricles and the atria? Well, I'm asking the question, so what's the obvious answer?
No, not really.
And the obvious answer is a yes, absolutely there is. But let's figure out what it is. What do you think the big difference between the atria and the ventricle are?
The size?
The size, absolutely. The thickness of the walls. The job of the atria is just to pump blood into the ventricles. And it doesn't even pump all the blood into the ventricles because the atria are superior. The majority of the blood actually just falls into the ventricles via gravity. So the atria are these tiny little things. In fact, when you look at the anatomy of them, they're almost these collapsed kind of chambers. And the way they collapse down, when you look at the end, they have this kind of rough, bumpy end to them. Anyone know what those rough, bumpy edges of the atria are called? It's on your anatomy list. I'm just curious if anybody looked ahead. It's called the auricles. Auricle means dog-eared. They have this kind of dog-eared end appearance to them as they fill up, and then they have the ability to contract. They have muscle in them, but the muscle is much thicker in the walls of the ventricle. However, are the walls of the ventricle, of the right ventricle and the left ventricle equal in size?
No.
No. Which one's bigger?
Left.
Left. The left has a much, much thicker muscular wall to it because its job is to pump the blood all the way out to the body, right? Any good samurai movie worth its salt, at some point somebody gets their head chopped off. And if it's a good samurai movie, when that happens, you see this huge spurt of blood, right, that goes 10 feet up into the air, right? And the reason for that is that massive pressure that is being produced by the left ventricle. Its wall is much, much thicker. And it's also got a more efficient orientation to it. We'll look at this in just a minute when we look at the pretty pictures from your textbook. But the left ventricle is basically a big circular chamber with a big, huge, thick wall that allows it to produce massive strength as it contracts. The right ventricle not only has a thinner wall, but it actually wraps around the left chamber. So if you think about it, if you make a fist and you wrap your other hand around it and you try to produce tension, you can produce much more tension with the fist that is circular than this one trying to squeeze on the outer surface of the other one. So the pressure in the left ventricle is much, much greater. And of course, what makes the world go round?
Pressure.
There you go. I know those of you who had me for 430. I know those who didn't have me for 430 don't understand that question because I know most of you thought love, right, which is adorable. Some of you thought money, right, but no. Pressure is what truly makes the world go round. And here we see dramatic differences in the pressure. This one produces a massive amount of pressure. Massive pressure because it has to pump that blood all the way to from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. Whereas the right ventricle just has to send it to the lungs, which are right next door. And do we necessarily want massive pressure in our lungs?
No.
No, our lungs are super delicate. So here we have much less pressure. It's much lower pressure. Massive differences in the pressures of the blood coming out of the left ventricle versus the right ventricle. But what about volumes? Is the volume of blood pumped from both the same?
No.
No?
All the same. Yes.
I've heard yes, I've heard no. Let's think about this. This is a closed pump system, right? Hopefully your cardiovascular system is a closed system. If it's not a closed system, please go see a doctor immediately, right? It's a closed system. So if you have two pumps working together and one keeps pumping 100 liters of water out and the other one only pumps 50 liters of water out, and this is a closed system, is that going to work?
No.
No. While the pressures are massively different between the two chambers, they both move the exact same volume of blood. So both sides move the same volume of blood, but they move it with much, much different pressures. So they both pump the blood out, and they actually, here, I'll write it here, both pump same volume of blood.
Is that because the right ventricle only has to pump it to the lungs?
Yeah, it only has to pump it to the lungs, so it doesn't need near the pressure to get it to go where it needs it to go. The lungs are right next door. We want the pressure lower in the lungs than we want it in the aorta because we have farther to distribute it. So yeah, so one's able to get it to go a much shorter distance with much less pressure, whereas the other one needs much more pressure because it has to get it to go much further. Awesome. Excellent. That is a perfect start. So those are a couple of big differences. There's one other thing, or really two other, or really, I guess, four other things that we need as well. We have these two independent pumps that are working together to move oxygen-poor and oxygen-rich blood. But notice also, these are one-way systems. We want to make sure that blood continues to go in one direction. And what helps us to assure that that blood moves in just one direction?
Valves.
Valves, absolutely. And valves come in two flavors. What are the two flavors of valves that we can have?
Bicuspid and tricuspid.
Excellent. The first type are atrioventricular valves. How many of those do we have?
Two.
Two. Excellent. Perfect. What would they be individually? What are the two specific atrioventricular valves?
Bicuspid and tricuspid.
Excellent. Bicuspid and the tricuspid. Right? These, which is which? Where do you find, okay, let's start easy. Where do you find atrioventricular valves?
Between the atrium and the ventricles.
Hence the name. They're between the atria and the ventricles. And there are two, the bicuspid and the tricuspid. Excellent. Where would the bicuspid be?
Between the left.
There you go, exactly. And why do you think it's called the bicuspid?
Two, what is it?
Two cusps. Bicuspid means two cusps. So what the heck's a cusp? It's basically a flap. There are these flaps that dangle down, and there are two of them over here on the left side. And so there's two on the left side, right? Those flaps come together to help to keep the one-way flow of it. Whereas, guess how many flaps you have in the tricuspid?
Three.
Three. And again, with my limited drawing skills, I'll cheat and we'll put a third one there in the middle. There you go. Three on that side. So there you go. So we have the tricuspid over here with three, bicuspid over there with two. Excellent. We'll talk about the function of them in just a minute. What's the other type of valves?
Semilunar.
Excellent. Semilunar valves. Where are these located? Oh, how many do we have?
Two.
Excellent. Where would you describe the definition of where the semilunar valves are located? Tricuspid is only on the right. Bicuspid is only on the left. Well, I like that. Ventricular exit, or we could say it's to be consistent with what we said before. They're between the ventricle and the great artery coming out of it. Excellent. Of course, what are the two great arteries that leave the two ventricles?
Pulmonary artery.
Pulmonary trunk. And the other one is the
ascending aorta.
Ascending aorta. So guess how we identify the two semilunar valves? Pulmonary.
Pulmonary semilunar.
There you go.
Aortic semilunar.
There you go. Pulmonary semilunar valve and the aortic semilunar valve. And actually, I didn't write valves above. Actually, I'll leave it there. Valve, that's fine. And of course, not shockingly, the pulmonary semilunar valve is found between the right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk. So I haven't used pink yet. Let's use pink. So there we have that little half moon shape, semilunar, because they're half moon there. And the aortic semilunar valve is between the left ventricle and the ascending aorta. Excellent. So these valves work together to limit the flow of the blood and maintain that one-way flow. All right. Again, I appreciate that this is a very simplistic schematic, but I think it's a nice way to start because we get a much better sense of the flow and how things move. And if we're comfortable with this, we can go back to the pretty pictures and go through this again. So here again, we see the 4 chambers, the 2 atria, the 2 ventricles. And actually, let me switch to my highlighter because I like that. Notice the difference in the thickness of the walls. The atrias are much, much thinner. The ventricles are much, much thicker. But in particular, that left ventricle is much, much thicker than the right because this is the one that generates the most force. Here we see those 2 big blood vessels, the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava feeding into the right atrium. It feeds into the right ventricle through one. Here we see one of the cusps of that tricuspid valve. It then flows out the pulmonary semilunar valve to the pulmonary trunk, which branches immediately to the pulmonary arteries. Blood comes back from the lungs through the pulmonary veins into the left ventricle, through the bicuspid into the left atrium, into the left ventricle, where it then gets squirted out the aortic semilunar valve into the ascending aorta and the aortic arch and around that way. Here we get a nice view of not just the difference in the thickness between the left ventricle and the right, but that difference in the orientation where the left is circular and the right wraps around it. So you get to really see that nicely here because again, this has to produce much more pressure, much more efficient, whereas the right isn't nearly as efficient. And then here we see a real heart, so we get to see all of the pretty stuff that goes along with that. We have already identified all of our great vessels. We have the superior and inferior vena cava that feed into the right atrium. There is one more important vessel that feeds into the right atrium, but like I said, we'll save that for later. Notice here we see the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 superior, 2 inferior, 2 left, 2 right, pulmonary veins. So these 4 feed into the left ventricle, atrium, don't know why I keep doing that. So there are 3 main blood vessels that feed into the right atrium, 4 main blood vessels that feed into the left atrium. Left atrium feeds the left ventricle, which feeds into the ascending aorta. And as we said, the right ventricle feeds into the pulmonary trunk. All right. How are we on time? We're doing good. All right. We started talking about them, so let's finish off the valves and then we'll take our next break and then come back and do some more. Before we do that though, so again, as I mentioned, these valves help to maintain the one-way flow of the blood. We have these kind of 2 independent pumps that are working side by side. We have the atrioventricular valves that are located between the atria and the ventricles. And we have the semilunar valves that are located between the ventricles and the great arteries, the pulmonary trunk and the ascending aorta. Let's talk a little bit about the anatomy and function of them. Here we see them from a top side view. I love this picture from your textbook. Basically what they've done here is taken a heart and peeled away the atria. And when you peel away the atria, you can actually see all the valves at once. And notice we'll cheat and use the illustration because it's a little bit easier. Notice here we can see that there is 1 and 2 cusps to that bicuspid valve, where there is 1, 2, 3 to the tricuspid valve, those flap-like structures that hang down. Notice both semilunar valves also have 3 cusps. So 3 of our 4 valves all have 3 flaps to them. Only the bicuspid has 2. However, notice these are different shapes. These 3 are shaped in kind of these half circles or half moon, which is what semilunar means. So we have 3 semilunar valves, 3 half moon shaped cusps that are working together to keep the blood vessels closed out from the ventricle. When we talk about their function, and here we see those flaps hanging down, dangling down of those atrioventricular valves, their goal is to stop the flow of the blood back into the atria when the ventricle contracts. So notice when the ventricle is relaxed, that valve is open. As we said, blood flows into the atria and then just flows right down into the ventricle. But when the ventricle starts to contract, so when the ventricle contracts, oops, it decreases the volume. And of course, when you decrease volume, what effect does that have on pressure?
Increases.
Increases pressure. That increase in pressure, and again, fluids don't like to be where there's more pressure. So as the pressure increases, what happens is that the blood starts to get back into the atria, and as it does, it catches these valves and it causes the valves to slap closed. The example I always like to think of this is if you have an umbrella that is only partially opened. Its umbrella edges are down, but you take it outside and a wind comes and picks up. That wind can get into it and pops the umbrella open. And the umbrella opens up as a result of that. And that's basically what happens here. The pressure of the blood basically causes those cusps to open. Now, what happens with that umbrella if it's too windy? Not only does it open the umbrella, but then what does it do?
Inverts.
Yeah, it can invert it. It can turn it inside out. And the same thing can happen with these valves. These valves dangle down. The pressure causes them to close. But if the pressure is too much, those valves could invert. And as they invert, that would stop the flow. So notice, to stop that from happening, there are these tiny muscles, finger-like extensions of muscles. Remember, a finger-like extension is a papillae. There are these papillae that have these white cord-like structures. Any idea what we would call these white cord-like structures?
Chordae tendinea.
Chordae tendinea. Excellent. These chordae tendinea, they hold on to the edge of it. So what happens is when the ventricle contracts, those papillae pull on those cords to anchor the ends of the flaps so that they don't invert. And we can see that with the pretty picture here. So let me clear my drawings. Oh, one more thing. Before we talk about the function, the names, remember the tricuspid has 3. It's over here on the right side. The bicuspid is on the left. And remember, what's special about the bicuspid is the only valve that only has 2 flaps to it. Notice it is sometimes referred to as the mitral valve. Any idea what mitral refers to? Well, mitral, anyone? The flaps of these cusps kind of have a weird shape to them. If they dangle down, what happens is they widen at first, and then they kind of come together at a peak. So they look like that. If you were to take, and it's 2 of them. If you think about it, if you were to take that and turn that upside down, and maybe even put a little T right in the center, what does it look like? I know my drawing skills aren't the best. It's a Pope's hat. A mitre is the Pope's hat. I know my drawing isn't the greatest, so I actually, before class, did a quick web search for the Pope. This is the picture I got. I'm pretty sure that's him. So if you look, there's our Pope, and you can see he has that mitre on his head, and that mitre is the shape of the valve. So that's why it's the bicuspid is also called the mitral valve, because of the mitre shape to those valves. All right? Now, as I mentioned, when the heart is at rest or when the atria are contracting, those valves are open and blood flows into the ventricle. But when the ventricle contracts, the pressure increases, the pressure pushes on those valves, and the cusps close. And notice those papillae pull on the chordae tendinea, maintaining the tension in there and stop the valve from prolapsing. All right? Questions on the function of that? Excellent. All right. Oh, I love these pictures. Notice here we see this great picture from your textbook where, again, we see the big difference in the thickness of the muscle layers between the left and the right ventricles. We can see these great chordae tendinea and the papillae, these big finger-like extensions. But this is the picture I love. they've actually filled a heart with saline and inserted a camera into there. So here we're actually in the ventricle. And in the ventricle, we can see how these finger-like papillae stick up, these papillae muscles, with the chordae tendineae connecting to those cusps, to those flaps. And when the heart contracts, those papillae contract, and they pull on the end of it to maintain the integrity of the atrioventricular valves. The semilunar valves work in a very different fashion. As I mentioned, they have this half moon shape to them with 3 different cusps to them. And again, the pulmonary semilunar valve is between the right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk. The aortic semilunar valve, and we see it peeking out here, is between the left ventricle and the ascending aorta. Notice when the ventricle contracts and that pressure increases, that pressure in the blood forces the blood out the semilunar valve into the arteries. So when the ventricle contracts, it's able to eject the blood through those cusps out into the arteries. When it relaxes and the pressure drops, all that blood wants to go back. And as the blood tries to go back, it catches in the cusps, slaps those cusps closed, and stops the blood from re-entering into the heart. And now it's stuck out here in the great vessels and either has to go to the body or has to go to the lungs. So notice, and here we'll cheat and look at the pictures. When the ventricles are relaxed, the semilunar valves are closed and the atrioventricular valves are open. When the ventricle contracts, the semilunar valves open and the atrioventricular valves close. Now, you may never have thought of these valves opening and closing in this way, but most of you are familiar with this because if you were to lay your head on the chest of a loved one or just some random person at a bar, right, you would be able to hear their heartbeat, right? That lub-dub sound, lub-dub, lub-dub. Of course, what's the technical term? Anyone know the technical term for lub-dub?
Lub-dub.
Lub-dub is the technical term, exactly. Excellent. The lub and dubbing is the valves. And let's think about it. Is it the valves opening or the valves closing that you hear?
Closing.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it this way. When you have a teenager, right, like I have 2 of them, and they go storming off to their room, do you hear them open the door or do you hear them close the door? Close. There you go. When they close, so that first one, the lub, is the closing of the atrioventricular valves, and the dub is the closing of the semilunar valves. All right, so in this way, these 2 sets of valves work together to keep those 2 pumps pumping that blood along those 2 one-way paths. All right, questions on that? All right, so here's the good news. We're actually ahead of schedule of where I wanted to be because we raced through the introductory stuff so quickly. So here's the 2 things I want to do, especially for those who didn't have me for 4:30. Let's go ahead and take one more quick break. We'll make it a 15-minute break, so we will come back at 2:58. And I will start the recording at that point because I'm going to make sure that we have time for that. All righty. We are back. Any questions before we dive in? Okay. So as I mentioned, aside from all of the introductory stuff, the hoops you have to jump through to make sure that you can do everything correctly, there are a fair amount of assignments that you are responsible for in this section, and it goes pretty quick. Like I said, the reviews are pretty self-explanatory. Again, when you click on them, the page numbers are there, but the real key to remember is that there are 2 parts to these review, a check your recall and a check your understanding, and you have to do both of them. So make sure you're doing that and completing both parts of that to get full credit. What I want to talk about first is I want to come back to this cardiovascular anatomy and histology list. So when we look at this list, we see a couple things. There we go. Here we see the heart anatomy, and notice there's many things that we've already talked about here, both growths and microscopic anatomy that we have talked about. But what I really want to talk about first are the blood vessels, right? Knowing, and again, this is easier when we're on campus, knowing where Auburn Boulevard is useful. Knowing how Auburn Boulevard relates to Madison, relates to Greenback, relates to all of those is even more important. So while it is important on a model, on a chart, on an illustration to be able to identify the ascending aorta or the brachial artery or something along those lines, you need to understand the relationship of these things as well. And so as I mentioned on the exam, there are basically, can you guys see this if I write this out here? 5 possible questions. Can you guys see that? Oh, I can't see that. Hold on. Try this again. There we go. 5 possible questions that I could ask about any of these blood vessels. So I'll ask again. Can you guys see that where I'm writing this here?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure you just couldn't see that. All right, excellent. Obviously, the most obvious one is I can ask you to identify the blood vessel. So I can have a picture of like a head or like a model or a chart or an arm or a leg, point at a blood vessel and ask you to identify what that blood vessel is. All right. And so your answer for things like that would be vertebral artery or transverse sinus or celiac trunk or splenic vein or whatever it is along those lines. There are the 2, hopefully for the most part, obvious questions as well. The first is a direction the blood vessel carries blood. And if you think about this, being the sophisticated students that you are, how many possible answers for that question are there? How many possible answers could there be for if I point at any of the blood vessels on the list and ask you the direction the blood vessel carries the blood? How many possible answers are those? Oh, I don't have my chat window up, but I see it blinking. 3. 3 sounds like a lot.
2.
2. What are they?
Away and to.
Away and toward.
Heart.
There you go. Excellent. There's only 2 possible answers for this. It's either going to be away from the heart, or it's going to be to the heart or towards the heart. Excellent, right? So there's only 2 possible answers to that, away from the heart or towards the heart. Excellent. Same thing for the 3rd possible question. Condition of the blood in this blood vessel. And how many possible answers are there for that?
2.
2. And what are those 2 possible answers?
Oxygen rich and oxygen poor.
Oxygen rich. And oxygen poor. Now, obviously, there is more to the condition of blood than just its oxygen carrying content. But for right now on this test, if I were to ask the condition of the blood, that's really what I'm looking for. Oxygen rich or oxygen poor. All right? So those are pretty simple and straightforward. But there are 2 more questions I can ask as well. And these relate more to understanding the relationship of these blood vessels. The first question I can ask is identify the blood vessel or vessels that directly receive blood from this blood vessel. All right, let's take an example. Let's say, for instance, there happens to be a blood vessel in your body, and that blood vessel in your body happens to be the brachial artery. Where do you think the brachial artery is located?
The arm.
Arm. Excellent. What part of the arm?
Upper arm.
Upper arm. There you go. Excellent. Right there. Perfect. You get 1 on each side. We have that brachial artery that is located on that side of your arm. All right. Excellent. So there. Oh, and then I've got it spelled wrong. Sorry. Brachial artery. What blood vessel or vessels directly receives blood from the brachial artery? Well, let's go through these questions. Let's answer all of these questions. So we've identified the blood vessel there in the arm. What direction does this blood vessel carry the blood, the brachial artery carry blood?
Away.
Excellent, so it carries away. What is the condition of the blood?
Oxygen rich.
Excellent. Now, what blood vessel, because it's going away from the heart, so down this way, what blood vessel or vessels are going to directly receive blood from the brachial artery?
Carotid.
Say again?
Carotid.
Now remember, so think of it this way. Again, you're driving directions. You're a red blood cell sitting in that brachial artery, moving away from the heart. Where are you going to go? Excellent. One location you could go is to the radial artery.
Or the ulnar.
Or ulnar. Excellent. All right, excellent. So those are the ones that are going to directly receive. Now, two things. Are there others? Yes, but these are the only two that are on your blood vessel list that you're responsible for. You're only responsible for the blood vessels on your list. And again, remember I said directly, right? They're going to lead into, for instance, the superficial palmar arch and other things along those lines. I don't care about those. What I care about is which ones directly receive. And conversely, I can ask the question, identify the blood vessel or vessels that directly feed blood into this blood vessel. And what would the answer to that be?
Subclavian.
Excellent.
Or axillary.
There you go. That's the one that I wanted even better. Exactly. The one that is going to directly feed into it is the axillary. Oops. Oh. Artery. Excellent. Axillary artery. Now, yes, the subclavian feeds into the axillary, but that means the subclavian doesn't directly feed into the brachial. Right. So again, one of the things, I don't know if I've said it yet in this class, one of the things that I often say in this class, I'll say it many, many times, I'll continue to say it many, many times, is that people often lose points, not because they don't know the information, but because they don't read the question carefully. If I was pointing at the right brachial artery, and I asked you to identify the blood vessel or vessels that directly feeds blood into the right brachial artery, and you said the ascending aorta, which feeds into the aortic arch, which feeds into the brachiocephalic trunk, which feeds into the right subclavian artery, which feeds into the brachial artery, you have provided me with a tremendous amount of information, far more information than I asked for. The problem is you didn't answer the question, right? Because none of those were the ones that directly feed into it. You gave me the pathway, you gave me the driving directions, but you forgot the axillary. And while you showed me great knowledge, did you answer the question? No. And if you don't answer the question, I can't give you full credit. All right? Notice two more things on this list. Right and left matters. Artery and vein matters. There is nothing I hate more than seeing a person write down the hard part, right? Hemiazygous vein, right? Or something like that. Or let's use a better example. External iliac artery. But they forget to say right or left, and I have to take off partial credit for that. Don't give me the hard part and forget the easy parts like right and left. Don't give me the hard part and forget the easy parts like arteries and veins. Make sure you write out right or left. Make sure you write out artery or vein. And again, the reason this is going to be important, because if I showed you a picture of an arm, here, let's cheat. I don't want to leave this. I know how I can do this. Hold on. Oh, this is going to go away if I do that. Never mind. All right. We'll look at an arm picture later. But notice there's a brachial artery, and guess what sits right next to it? Sitting right next to the brachial artery is the brachial vein. So on that model, on that chart, on that illustration are going to be two blood vessels sitting right next to each other, side by side. And if I point at the red one and ask you to identify it, you're going to say brachial. And if I part to the blue one and ask it, you're going to say brachial. Now, hopefully you'll distinguish artery and vein. Hopefully you'll say right versus left, but they're both brachial. So if you think about it, question one on those is kind of the same. But what about the rest of the questions? Are the rest of the questions the same for these two blood vessels? No. Which way does the brachial vein carry blood?
Towards the heart.
Way.
Yep. Carries towards. And again, I know I'm not writing the heart there, but you get it. What's the condition of the blood in the brachial vein?
Oxygen poor.
Oxygen poor. What blood vessel or vessels directly receives blood from the brachial vein?
Superior vena cava?
Nope, before that. You guys are overthinking this.
Yeah.
What do you think the brachial vein feeds into?
Brachiocephalic.
Before that.
The axillary.
Axillary vein, exactly, right? These blood vessels are almost
Axillary
identical. They're symmetrical. Arteries and veins are often symmetrical. Often, doesn't mean always, but most of the time are symmetrical. So in this case, the brachial vein feeds into the axillary vein. And guess what blood vessel or vessels feeds blood into the brachial vein?
Radial.
Radial and ulnar vein.
There you go. So there you go. Those are the 5 possible questions. If I show you any blood vessel and point at a blood vessel, yes, I'm going to ask you to identify it, but I also want you to understand how that blood vessel relates to the cardiovascular system. Which way is it carrying the blood? What kind of blood is it carrying? What connects to it, and what does it connect to? Right? If you want to give someone driving directions from your house, right, to school, you can't just rattle off the names of the streets. You have to give them an order. You have to give the relationship to them. And that's what this is about, understanding that relationship. Towards that end, whoops, no, that's what I want. Towards that end, oh, this is a mess. All right, does everybody have this before I go ahead and erase it? All right, no one's complaining yet, so I can clear all of that. Towards that end, I have given you an assignment. This is the assignment, as I mentioned, that is going to be graded for correctness. And this is your cardiovascular exercises. So again, this is where you turn in the assignment and the assignments. The actual handout is here under the lab handouts. When you click on the lab handouts, basically what this assignment is driving directions. Part of understanding the cardiovascular system is how blood flows through it. Notice the first part of this, we are talking about the heart. So as we mentioned, there are 3 passageways that the blood enters into the heart, or more specifically into the right atrium. What were those 3 again? Well, what were the 2 I gave you?
The vena cava.
Okay, but is that really, is that accurate enough? Specific enough?
Superior and inferior.
There you go. Superior vena cava. Inferior vena cava. Vena cava. And there is one more. I'll ask it. I'm not going to write. Anybody know off the top of the head what the 3rd blood vessel that feeds into the right atrium is?
Isn't it a cardiac vein?
It is indeed. Excellent. Very good. It's not called cardiac vein, but there is a cardiac vein that does it. Excellent. I'll let you guys figure out which one it is. Excellent. If you're going to leave the right atrium, what do you have to pass through to get out of the right atrium?
The tricuspid.
There you go, out the tricuspid valve. So your answer there would be the tricuspid valve. Perfect. Excellent, right? So in this way, you're going to give these passageways through the heart. And then you're going to put it all together. Notice as we scroll down. Oops. Here, you're going to actually give me that. From the superior vena cava, you enter into the right atrium, pass through the tricuspid valve, all the way to the capillaries of the lungs, then back to the heart, and all the way out and up into the, yes, you're always going to write right or left where appropriate. Absolutely. Okay. Now, again, you don't have to worry about right or left tricuspid because you don't have two tricuspids. But if you're talking about a ventricle, you need to say right or left ventricle. I have given you the correct number of steps. If you don't fill up this or you have too many, you've got it wrong. So this is the correct number of steps for flowing through the heart. Then we're going to do the exact same thing with blood vessels. I have given you two different locations here in the body, like the superficial right side of the head. In this case, I just want blood vessels, and I just want blood vessels off your list. So as you're filling this out at home and you're leaving the left ventricle, what is the first blood vessel you are going to enter into?
Ascending aorta.
Excellent. Oops. And then what would the second one be?
Aortic arch.
Aortic arch. And so on and so forth till you get to the blood vessel on your list. Now, again, there could be many routes to get here, but only use the blood vessels on your list. You're going to get to a blood vessel on your list that gets you to the right side of the head, the superficial right side of the head. And looking at the list of blood vessels in front of you, any idea what blood vessel that might be? If only I had that list of blood vessels in front of me. I might be able to look at that list and figure out which blood vessel which artery might carry blood to the superficial right side of my head.
With the right common carotid.
That might be part of the way, but what's actually going to get me there? I don't want to know the next one on the list. I want to know what's going to actually feed the superficial right side of my head. There you go. Right superficial temporal artery. Excellent. And again, don't abbreviate like I'm doing. I just need to do that to fit that in. Once you get to the location, remember the capillary is both where the exchange of materials is going to take place, but this is also your turnaround point. So obviously it is going to be arteries for the first part, and then it's going to be veins for the way back. And you're going to follow those veins back, and they're going to feed you back to the right atrium. So again, just using the blood vessels on your list, you are going to fill this out. I have given you the correct number of steps. If you don't have too many or too less, you've got it wrong. I don't want valves. Notice we didn't put the aortic semilunar valve. I just want blood vessels here on your list. And you're going to do that. Then you're going to do the same thing going to the left knee. Then, once you do that, you get to pick two of your own destinations. Pick two of your own destinations and do it the exact same way. Give me driving directions. Two things I want to remind you. This assignment is graded for correctness. So I do want it to be accurate. I do want it to be correct. However, notice this assignment isn't due till September 8th. Because if you don't even know where the deep femoral vein is yet, can you necessarily know and understand its relationship to other blood vessels? No, of course not. You need to learn the blood vessels first. Once you learn the blood vessels, then you can put them together into driving directions. So I have this available, and it's graded for correctness. And whenever I do that, people always freak out. Oh, it's a big, important assignment. I got to start working on it right away. Don't. Learn the blood vessels first, and this will be a much easier assignment. Could you brute force, just without knowing this stuff, using the textbook, using the atlas, using all the other things, come up with all the correct answers for this? Yes, absolutely. But would it help you to learn it if you were to brute force it right now? No. Learn the material, start getting familiar with the material first, and then start working on this assignment. So I know it's there, I know it's scary, but don't start working on it yet. Start working on noticing your list, understanding the relationship of the blood vessels at the local level, And then as you get more and more familiar, then you can figure out your driving directions. All right. Questions on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure you already said this, but I'm
sorry?
trying to find it. I'm sure you already said this, but I'm trying to find it. Where is this list?
So again, all the papers that you're going to need are here in the module. So notice under the lab handouts, the lab handouts is where you find your study guide. This is the list. And it's also where you're going to find the cardiovascular system exercises.
I found that. I can find it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so this is your study guide. This is your assignment. Okay, and then like I said, these are some individual pictures. I've had students in the past who really like having some of the pictures from the textbook unlabeled so that they can do some of the labeling themselves. So again, it's always been something that some people have liked as a study tool, so I've made that available. And then the other thing that's here, one of the things that I think is more confusing are the blood vessels in the abdominal aorta and the inferior vena cava. And I found this while I was working on some other things, and I thought it was a nice kind of schematic that did a good job of showing some of the differences. Because remember, as we talked about, like for instance, in the arm, the arteries and the veins are almost completely symmetrical. In the abdominal pelvic cavity, they're not. There's some big differences. And so this, I think, does a nice job of showing that. For the destinations we make up, it has to include the vessels from the list. Yes, it has to include the vessels of your list. How many steps is up to you. It depends on the destination, right? If you decide to go to the left big toe, you're probably going to have more steps than if you go to the right shoulder. Could you do the easy one of doing the shoulder? Sure. Is that going to be as much of a good of a learning experience for you? Probably not. So I would try to make it as challenging as possible for myself to make sure that I understood it, but I'm purposely not putting that criteria on it. So if you want to go, if you want to, like I said, if you want to go to the shoulder and back, if you want to go to the ribs and back, you can do that, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine as long as it's correct. All right. Any other questions? All right, that is everything that I wanted to cover for today. We're finishing a little bit early because again, normally we would have time in the classroom to start working on this. I want to remind you again that your 5 for 5, the 5-minute meeting with me for 5 points of extra credit is due by the beginning of class on Thursday. I'll have office hours tomorrow. I'll have office hours on Thursday. And since we're finishing a little bit early, I can, I'm not sure what the best way to do this is. I'll probably just stay here. And what I can do is open up at a waiting room and move people who want to stick around to the waiting room. And we can do it that way as well, since we have a little bit of time that way. Your lab safety, your proctorio quiz is due. Make sure you do that. I haven't started grading the ones that are there yet, but I will tell you from viewing the ones from 4:30, some people are not scanning their area properly. Again, I know it's silly, but I will say that when you're asked to show your ID, you do not hold your ID up to the screen where the green box is. Hold your ID up to the camera so it lines up with the green box. I know it seems like a silly thing to say, but I've had 4 different students and 1 instructor that I've worked with who put it up to the screen. So I think it's worth saying to remind people of that. And there are other activities that you can start working on as well. Someone mentioned, and actually I will do that. Let me do that now before I quit. As I mentioned, I use some of the same, oops, hold on. Cancel that. I use some of the same materials for both classes, including the including the proctorio quiz, and there's a chemistry prerequisite for 4:30, so I have them do a chemistry quiz on that, and I encourage them to do the proctorio one first to make sure that it works properly. So I forgot to remove that from the instructions, so I'll do that now so that that's less confusing. Thank you. I know a couple people have mentioned that to me, so I apologize for not fixing that sooner, but that is fixed now. Excellent. So that won't be confusing anymore. Great question. So another question is, yes, so I will stick around today to do 5 for 5s for those that want to. What I did in my 4:30 class is I closed the classroom. and then I was going to try to open up my office to be able to do it there. The problem is that I have to close the Zoom meeting before it will start compiling the video that I'm recording. Since I wasn't able to open up my Zoom on the same computer when it was compiling. So what I think I'll do is I'll stay here for right now. I'll open up a weight room and move people over and take them one at a time. And then what we'll do is, so then I won't be able to compile the video till after I'm done with that. So we'll do that for a little while. I'll compile the video. My guess, based on the time, is it probably won't be uploaded onto YouTube till sometime tomorrow. And because tomorrow morning, this is my bad turnaround. I have the late class today and the early class tomorrow. So my guess is that I won't get a chance to put it up to YouTube till tomorrow after class around 1. And then it can take anywhere from 20 minutes to 3 hours for it to load to YouTube. So my guess is the video will be there tomorrow evening on YouTube. Is probably the most likely thing that will happen. All right. Any other questions?
So the 5 for 5 thing, we can just come to any office hours that you have, and then it'll be good.
But again, remember up until Thursday. So Thursday. So yes, you can come to my office hours tomorrow. You can come to my office hours on Thursday. If those don't work for you, then you can email me and we can try to make other arrangements. Just with it being the first week, my schedule's pretty crazy right now, so I don't have a lot of open time outside of this. So one of the reasons why I opened up the Canvas site last week to try to give people the opportunity to do these things last week when things weren't quite so crazy. This first week is pretty crazy, so I'll definitely be there for office hours. I may be available outside of that, but so if you can't make the office hours, do that. And like I said, I can stick around here for people who are interested in trying to getting that in now as well.
All right.
All right. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yep.
Yeah. For the back to the 5 for 5, we
Yes.
did it last week, but you didn't add the grade. Do you just add that later?
Yes, I have not. You are correct, because it is something I have to manually input. I have not input those grades yet. So yes, I have not put in the grades yet for those that have it. But if you did it, I have it marked off, and I have yours. Yes, I have your credit. You have the credit. I just haven't put them in yet. I haven't put them in for either class yet.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right, excellent. We finished early. Again, it's not always going to be this lucky. It's weird. You know, as I mentioned, I had the advantage, although I'm not sure I would call the word advantage, but I got to teach 430 during the summer. And as such, I got to work out a lot of the kinks. You got to remember the last time I taught 431 was back in the spring when we started online and got halfway through the class before, you know, the world turned upside down. So this first part of the class, I don't have all the timing down yet because I haven't had a chance to do it online. So we will go through some growing pains. There may be days like today where we finish early. There may be some days where we're up till the very last minute covering material. I've tried to spread it out as much as I can, but some of these things, it's tricky because not only do I know how long the stuff takes in the class, but it's different when we're doing it in this format. And like I said, and usually there's more physiology, but I think that's the good thing about this is this will give us more time to do histology and to work on the microscopes and the things like that that you don't normally have the time to do in the classroom. So we'll get a little bit more time to work on those things together, and I think it will be useful that way. All right?
Cool.
So again, don't expect it always to go this short. All righty. All right, then if there aren't any other questions, like I said, you guys have a great day. I'm going to stop the recording. I'll give people a chance to leave, and then what I'll do is I'll start bumping people to the waiting room, and I'll start letting people in one at a time to do the 5 for 5 if you need to. All right, you guys have a great day, and I will see you on Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.